What's happening? Welcome to the lab. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz. Good to see you. Good to be here. And joined by forensic psychologist, author, member of the Cold Case Foundation, author of The New Evil, a very, very in-depth book highlighting the levels of evil broken down into how many different categories, Dr. Gary?
22.
22. And let me see here. Let me see. Did he? Let me see here. Anyway, welcome everybody. How are you doing tonight? I hope well. Sunday. People call them the Sunday scaries. Have you heard of that one, Dr. Gary?
I have indeed.
Do you get those?
No.
No. Every day is the same to you? Is it like Groundhog's Day? Just like we're working today.
Yes, sir. That is the way it goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, especially when you're just constantly going. And if you're not working in your office, you're always doing something else.
Always doing something else.
Yeah.
I see new days as sort of like a whole new life. You know, if I did something bad yesterday, it's dead today. If I did something good yesterday, it means nothing. I've got to redo it today, or it never happened. Each day is a fresh day.
It's a fresh day.
Right. Everything good and bad in this whole life is temporary, which is the scariest and most consoling thing you could think of at the same time.
I mean, I completely get what you're saying. It's like it's like existentialism. You know, people just spend their whole lives trying to figure out the meaning of life, and even though it's been written about, even though it's been talked about, it never completely lands with everybody. You know what I mean? Like, because everybody's different, and the way they feel about life is different. For some reason, I always felt like it's just excuse me, hold on. Frog in my throat, an actual frog. The meaning of life. I mean, I always put it with like family and friends, and just trying to be the best person that you could be, really. I don't know. Seems like that's a good answer to me, but some days that's not enough either. You know, you never really can 100% nail it in. But are you doing well today?
I am.
Okay, so we're gonna take some call-ins, and I'll throw the number up here in a second. And I want just when people call in and ask a question, I want to make sure that we're being appropriate with questions. If you call in and you're looking for advice on how to deal with alcoholism or drugs, that's not something that Dr. Gary can give you advice on. That's not something
not on here in private, in practice, of course. But yeah. But here is just, we're here to talk about true crime generally.
And people that are affected by true crime, and if something has happened, like we had some wonderful callers the other night, and I'm sure that we will have more. Let me see here. Let's see. And Melly, thank you, says, "Hi, Dr. Gary. We love you on the lab." Yeah, we certainly do. He is a wealth of knowledge. All right, so I'm going to throw the number up here, and we'll take calls as they come in. But as for anything else, I mean, what have you been keeping an eye on in the true crime realm? Anything in particular?
Me asking me, or is that a question to the audience? Well, I've been writing, so I've had my focus on cases that are in the past, and not so much because there's anything about them that has me sort of fixated or something. It's just the idea that I see them as learning experiences to prevent future crime. And the book I'm doing is about the cases that have haunted me the most, because remember, part of the definition of evil that Michael Stone and I talked about in The New Evil is the idea that something has to be so shocking and bewildering that it overwhelms you, it confuses you, it upsets you because it goes so beyond human behavior and in your mind. And so I've been looking at cases like that, and of course they sit in your stomach like a hot stone. And so that's where, no pun intended. So that's where my mind has been in the world of these terrible, terrible things that have happened years past. And a lot of these cases have gotten gobbled up in time. They're unsolved. These people's blood seems to kind of cry out from the ground, and hopefully writing about these cases will reawaken them for somebody out there. But that's where my head's been more than in the present with regard to true crime. But in the current cases, there's none in particular stands out. I mean, I'm interested in the Lisk case, of course, because I do expect that there almost certainly will be additional bodies that will be tied, because I don't believe, if he's a sexually sadistic serial killer, that he had no victims until the ones that have been tied to him potentially.
Right.
It would be very improbable. So I think that story is going to rapidly unravel if he's guilty. And of course, I'm interested in the Kohberger case. But I'm interested in the Kohberger case as a phenomenon, as a true crime phenomenon. I'm interested in, why are people interested in it? Why is it so fascinating? Why does he seem to get things that no one else gets? Why does it seem that he pulls strings? Why are there people who cultishly follow and defend him and send love letters and argue with people who talk about him as if he's, you're not allowed to be to counter anything he says? That's very interesting to me. And so, that's where we're at in terms of what my mind is on. How about you?
I've actually been getting back into the Menendez case. I've been watching that new Netflix series, and have you seen any of it?
Well, no, not yet. But remember that Ann Burgess, who I work with every week, who I write with on the Cold Case Foundation with her, I'm in Super Sleuths with her. We work on papers together. She's my research partner.
Yeah,
she was the one who worked with the brothers and testified, and so I'm intimately aware of the case. I'm also writing about it with her as we speak, comparing it to another case for a chapter in a book. So I'm intimately aware of it, but I haven't sat down and watched the show. I just kind of feel like it's kind of the way, like, you could live in New York your whole life and never go to the Statue of Liberty. It's like it's always there, so it doesn't feel like I have to sit down and make a special day out of watching the show about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's because I was pretty young when it happened, but I always kind of grew up listening to it, and it's a very intense situation, to say the least. So anyway, we got a caller. Let's go ahead and take the first call. Hopefully the delay's fixed a little bit. We'll see here. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, Josh, Dr. Gary, it's Stitch Slayer from the chat.
Hi.
Oh, you're a new member. Welcome.
I've been waiting to ask this question for so long. All right, so here's the question. Dr. Gary, I want to know what you think about the apparent uptick in the number of cases where parents, they torture and unalive their children, but especially those involving withholding of food as a form of punishment. It just seems like we're seeing a lot of those cases lately.
It's an interesting question. Well, consistent with the idea that Michael Stone and I write about, the idea that in the post-1960s period, there are a lot of offenses that are brand new, but there are also a lot of offenses that have always existed, but which are happening at a more rapid clip ever since that era. Yes, and I do think that. Yes, I hear both of you.
I can hear you when you talk. I just can't hear Dr. Gary because obviously I'm not on the letting YouTube stream.
Okay. So I think once people ask the question, Josh, they have to disconnect. Otherwise, we're going to do the Ouija board thing again, where they're like, "Are you there? Say yes. Knock if you're here." Let's.
That's
Maybe
weird because
maybe once the person asks the question, we'll disconnect and then they can hear the answer.
we didn't do that last time though. Did
But
it?
it seems to be what we have.
No, yeah. No, last night was fine, but tonight, I'm like right now, I'm dialed in on the phone and all I can hear is you.
Hmm.
You want to repeat everything I say?
But that's okay. If
Not
he wants to go ahead
particularly,
and
no.
answer, I could catch.
Well, you know what? Here's what we'll do.
I can catch it on the read.
Here's what we'll do.
All right.
We'll drop you, and then Gary can finish the call. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why that.
No problem. Yeah, just I'll listen to his answer on the rewall. No problem.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
So what I'm saying is that since the 1960s, we have seen an increase in certain offenses. The way that I heard the question really involved a few different things. So, for example, severe abuse of children involving neglect and abuse, such as what was described with the holding of food. You're seeing worse and worse cases where there's more sadistic playing out of torture that's over the top. For example, in the Sodo case, although I really don't like to think of Stefan Stearns as a parent, if he's guilty, you see the abuse of even recording the violence against the child, so that it looks like you would see in a serial predator or even a serial killer, that recording and fantasizing. So it's like this increasing audacity and use of technology and whatever. But then, of course, there was the element of it being a couple, a married couple that's doing this with children. Well, I guess they don't have to be married to have children, but the idea of them being a pair and the woman being involved is also something that you're seeing more and more of in this era. And so I think whatever is going on, and of course it's not possible to say, it has something to do with the increasing audacity and lack of some kind of moral code that is in the culture. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse as time goes on. A child abuse case, let's think of the Sylvia Likens case, right? The worst case, I think, what was it, Indiana? Worst case in that whole state's history. Would now be like page 20 in the newspaper, that child abuse case, because the horrors that are inflicted on children are getting worse as time goes on.
Right.
And some people may say, well, maybe we're just hearing about them more. It's possible, but I think the caller has a point that something feels different.
Yeah.
So
well, and again, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for your question. And,
it's a very interesting question. It's disturbing, but an interesting question.
It's always, isn't it always though? Like they're just these. All right, let's try this again here. Let's see if this caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Oof. I didn't expect that.
Very well. So I'm hoping I can explain this question. I might be really beyond where I can comprehend at my level. But you said in the 60s and 70s, we were seeing a lot of serial killers and an increase in violence in that area. Do you think that's because of the Vietnam War and women getting their independence? And do you think that could correlate now because women are losing their independence and we're fighting back and we're just getting out of another war? So could we see another rise in that way? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Quite a lot.
Can you hear Dr. Gary?
I don't even think she hears you. She heard the last caller heard one of us. This one hears none of us. So if the sequence continues, the next person, well, I guess
everybody.
Right, won't hear themselves.
She said she could hear. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me just see if I can address this. So first of all, one of the premises of the question is, did the war have anything to do with it? I don't think so. War has been with us since the beginning of time. But I do think the point about the liberation of women having a significance is an important one. Remember that in the late 60s, when you began to see the liberation of women, which is a wonderful thing, you also started to see an uptick in violence towards women from brittle men who were angry about the freedoms women were achieving. Women didn't have to stay married to them. Women didn't have to have their children. Women didn't have to do any of it. And as a consequence, you saw this explosion. Now, I always disliked that point because it could be misconstrued by somebody looking for an offense as suggesting a blaming of the victim, and that is not the point. The point is simply that it's a kind of depressing side effect of freedom that these people who hung on to power over women had to give it up. And what you've seen ever since is this uptick in violence toward women, to the point that the FBI had to create a behavioral science unit to figure out why there were all these sexual offenses and serial killings of women that were going on from that time onward. But in addition, to this day, even in the political world, what you see is people who are capitalizing on people's fear that people are getting too much freedom, that they want to put women back in their place, that they want to, anyone who isn't white and rich, whatever, has to be stuffed back into a time machine and taken back to because it's all about power. And, and that's depressing. But the reality is that I don't think that's ever going to be put back in the box. As a matter of fact, I think what we're going to see is the explosive power of women. And I'm grateful for it. I think that's a wonderful thing. Wouldn't you say, Josh?
Yeah, and I sometimes when I end up watching those like old TV shows and they say, you go, women can't vote, and you're going, what year is that? And it's like, it really wasn't that long ago, and so it doesn't. It just didn't seem like it was that long ago, and so yeah, I mean, I completely agree that I'm sure there was a lot of generational trauma, from every single war that has ever been fought, and
right. So, you don't think that I know this is because I'm a vet, so I know this is unpopular, but you don't think the trauma from being in a war and coming back has anything to do with the violence and the domestic violence and the serial killings, the mass killings and things like that.
Oh, I see the point. Well, I put it this way. I think the way that people were coping with the war, like, for example, the use of illicit substances, which became explosively popular at that time, had a lot more to do with increase in violence, unfair distribution of wealth, the idea of people losing a sense of purpose, where they would be more than happy to die on the altar of a country because they felt the war had no purpose, that they were dying meaninglessly. These are all things that I think had a psychological effect. They can have an ungluing effect, but I doubt very severely that they make a person go out and repetitively assault women and kill women. I think that would be an excuse.
Okay.
It had more to do with the idea that men were losing a sense of power and entitlement. And then certain kinds of men that already had a certain kind of psychopathic, sadistic proclivity felt entitled to go out and take whatever they want. And that's disturbing. But you see it all the way now through to the Me Too movement. And I think that violence towards women has existed, of course, ever since day one in the history of mankind. But you never saw an explosion of it in the Western world like you did in the period from the late 60s. Never. And that has got to have something to do with culture. So that's my hypothesis about what's going on. And I think what you're seeing now is that the country is teetering, going one way or the other, either going back to a time machine, back to a time of utter, rigid, Handmaid's Tale, like control, or liberation, and taking back one's rights. And I think we're going that way, to be honest.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I hope that answers some of your question. And I appreciate you calling in.
Sure does. Thank you very much. Both of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
A very interesting question. Quite a clever person.
and now the caller can hear you, hopefully. So that's a good thing.
Yes, I really appreciate the question because it's a deceptively simple question. But actually, you could study violent crime for decades and you would arrive at the same conclusion, that there's very strange uptick that has to be accounted for that came at that time.
And that's kind of part of the new evil as well.
That's exactly right.
It's just what it is. 781, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Josh. How are you? It's Karen Diaz.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
And thank you for having the show.
Oh,
Dr. Gary, school shootings are relatively, I say new, but newer. Is there a difference between school shootings and mass shootings with older people in places of workplace violence?
Well,
how are they similar? How are they different?
That's a very interesting question. First of all, now, if you'll forgive me, I have to get into the reads here for just a second. There really is no clear definition of what a school shooting means. For example, does a school shooting have to be a student who matriculates at the school? What if an outsider comes into the school who doesn't attend there? What if they were a person that attended school there years ago? What if the person commits a shooting out in the parking lot on the property of the school? What if they're 2 blocks away from the school, but they're students in the school? And what if the person who commits the shooting is an employee of the school and not a student? Do you include universities and colleges? Right? In other words, the list goes on. And importantly, do you have to have any fatalities? If you go into a school and you shoot 10 people and they all live, is it a school shooting? So the reality is, and no one seems to think about this, is that school shooting is a meaningless term. I think what people mean is a mass shooting that happens to occur under the roof of a school. And if that is true, then it would mean 4 victims or more killed in the same school at the same time, or 3 or more, depending upon your definition. I use the 3 or more definition. And so what I would say is school shootings are a little bit different because they tend to occur with perpetrators that are younger, assuming that the shooter is a student, that are younger on average.
Yes,
and the average man.
That's what I think of.
Right. And the average mass shooter is about 37 in the database we did, which is the largest study ever done of mass murder. So trust it. And mass shootings tend to involve younger people, kids, early adults. Now, why is that important? There's an extremely important thing going on there that you may miss. It's that when serious mental illness develops, it tends to be in the teenage years or young adulthood. And in my own work, what we've shown is that when illness is involved in violence, it's simply because it's very recently developed. Once a person is treated and knows they have a mental illness, the serious illness, it's when they do drugs or alcohol or don't do treatment anymore that they become aggressive. Otherwise, they're far more likely to be the victims of violence than to commit it. So the idea is when you have young people committing violence, I think it's more likely that mental illness will be a culprit. When somebody who's 35 or 40 years old takes a firearm out into the public, it's less likely. It's more likely there was a life event that triggered a brittle person with a problematic series of coping skills or personality. But when mental illness is involved, think younger. And that's why school shootings are a special phenomenon, right? I think that's where I'm more willing to say a lot of those kids are probably dealing with more traditional mental illness issues.
So Dr. Gary, basically what you're saying is a shooting is a shooting is a shooting, like a mass shooting. It doesn't matter.
In a perversion of Gertrude Stein, yes, a shooting is a shooting is a shooting, right?
Right, yeah. Like you don't really, if it's a mall or a school, mass shooting is a mass shooting.
Right, but there is a special reason that we set aside school shootings. They seem to be a little different because I think it has to do with the age. Right. The motive is a little different. That's the thing. So I'm very intrigued by those. For example, the Kohberger case if Koberger is guilty, that's a mass murder. And it's technically a school mass murder.
Yeah.
Right? That's interesting to think about. Right? And so anyone who remembers my profile of him will remember my saying that I speculated that this would be a young person who was emotionally troubled and would be considered odd by other people. And that had to do with several things: the weapon that was used, my sense of the likely age of the offender, and the location. See, so that's why these little trifles, these little technicalities matter. And I think it's a very clever question. These are good calls, Chris.
Yeah. Here we go. Well, thank you, Karen, so much.
I do have one other
Go
question.
ahead. Go ahead.
I'm curious because I did work in a school for 25 years, and towards the end of it, I was doing the drills and whatnot. I mean, I've seen the change in how schools are treated, like if kids are treated. I really am curious, are there similarities between these kids and teenagers? And also, this is a terrible thing to say, with all, and I'm not being political, if someone wants to get in to school and do, I almost feel they're going to get in no matter what, which is a terrible thing. People don't want to believe that.
I think of the symbol.
Psychological question.
I think what you're saying is actually quite symbolic, because imagine a person saying, "You didn't want to let me in, and now I'm forcing my way in. You can't say no now, can you? Now I'm in control of who's in." And that's the thing. It's a way of forcing. Yeah. Right. So it's an interesting comment.
Yeah. They're all sort of in the same vein of bullied, or the parents aren't sort of paying attention. Like, there seems to be, have they been studied yet? Or is there not enough, God forgive me, to say that I don't want there to be more?
We've studied them. We just did a paper on school shootings. The first author on the paper was Girgis, Girgis, because he was the person with whom I co-created the database at Columbia. And so sometimes I'm the first author on papers. He's the first author, depending upon who did the bulk of the writing. And on that paper, if you want to look it up, the first author is Girgis. And you said I'm on the paper, so it should be easy to find it. But that's a paper purely about school shooting, if you're interested.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you very much. And have a good night.
Thanks, Karen.
And thank you, Josh. Nice. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome.
All right.
That was very good, Chris. I called you Chris. You like that? It's an accident.
I mean, I like that name. It's a nice name. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care. Let's see here.
Don't call me Josh. It'll be weird.
Yeah, don't call me that.
And I'll call myself Gary.
215, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Dr. Vona, Professor Vona, some people might know. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can. Hi, Dr. Gary. I sent you my manuscript. Maybe you can look at it at some point. But anyway, that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling to talk about, real quick, I know a lot of people are going against Jennifer in the Madeline Sodo case. And I think that we have to make people aware of what can happen with psychological trauma and stuff like that. So I don't know if anybody saw the interview with his parents today, everything. I think that it's important to take note that, I think this is my opinion only, that Jennifer's denial is a reality of what's happening. It shows that Stern's parents refer to him as a narcissist. So if this is true, it shows how narcissists like Stern can maintain a facade of normalcy while committing heinous acts behind closed doors. Jennifer's tendency to focus on happier memories may be a way of protecting herself from the full emotional impact of that abuse. She has selective memory and even things like trauma bonding. So she hesitates to speak when spoken to by the detective. And after years of emotional manipulation, Jennifer feels trapped in a cycle where she cannot see herself as capable of making decisions without Stearns. Narcissists like Stearns use their power to create dependency, and Jennifer's mental health struggles likely deepen this bond. The fact that she asks whether she can change her mind about pressing charges suggests that she feels emotionally tied to him, even as evidence against him becomes undeniable. So this is a common reaction in victims of long-term abuse, where they feel conflicted about leaving the person who has controlled over them for so long. I was writing this as I was on hold because I wanted to make sure that I said some of the things, but I just feel like there's, it's very easy for us to, and let me be honest, I think that Jen was less than smart. I think that she was very into her own, so I'm not saying that she didn't do anything wrong, but I think that people are like going for her, and I just don't know if that's really doing a service if we as psychologists aren't reminding people that there are other Jen Sodos out there.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think she was manipulated.
This is a very complicated question. Josh, I don't know if you want to take the lead on this one.
Well,
I have some thoughts, but let me let you.
when it comes to Jennifer Sodo, and I have intentionally avoided this subject because I don't understand her, and it's hard for me to think about all the things that went on with Maddie under the supervision of adults, not just Jennifer, but Stefan, or however you pronounce his name. And I've seen some of these interviews with her, and I just don't understand her personally. Not in a mean way where I go, God, I can't understand why. Her responses are odd. Her demeanor is odd. There's a big disconnect there.
She said that,
what's that?
She says that she struggles from bipolar disorder. She says that she struggles from bipolar disorder and PTSD. So could this have left her vulnerable to Stern's emotional manipulation?
That would be a question for the doctor, but that all I know is that there is something there. There's some sort of delay. There's some sort of barrier. I don't know what it is. But I just find, I find all these interviews with her and Stefan troubling, but I'm withholding judgment until more, comes out, I guess you could say. But how do you feel about that, Dr. Gary?
And Josh, thank you.
Go ahead.
Wait, real quick, Josh, thank you for sharing your story. I want to make sure that I don't forget to say that. You're very, very brave. And not everybody can do that. So I thank you for that. But in doing so, do you believe that there could be cognitive dissonance as well? That's all I want to say. And then Dr. Gary, you can take it from there. So, and I'm sure Dr. Gary can answer that. So like on one sense, she is trying to believe what they're saying to her. And then in the other sense, she doesn't want to believe it. And now I'll shut up.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, this could be a survival technique, or it's just too much to bear, so she's not processing it properly. But yeah, I believe, like I said, I don't know anything about her medication. I don't know that much about being bipolar at all. But I just know that there's something. I can hear it. I see it, that there is some sort of disconnect. Dr. Gary, what say you?
Well, first of all, Josh, just check your private chat there for a second about something important I just sent you. Look, I think the problem is when you work with people who have been affected by this kind of offense, whether it's a parent who discovers this is going on with a child, whether it's a parent who is perverse themselves, whatever, you start to understand that there are a lot of different permutations, a lot of different explanations for how people get caught up in these different dynamics. Some of them have to do with the idea that the person is a victim themselves. Uh-oh.
Hold on.
Josh. Oh, am I in the show?
You're here.
Okay. Beetlejuice. Okay. So sometimes it has to do with that the person is somehow a victim themselves and they're afraid. Sometimes there's, what one might colloquially call the kind of Stockholm syndrome. Sometimes it could be that the person is also perverse Sometimes the person is not aware at all. Sometimes the person is so disturbed that, and so unwell that they're not consciously, completely in the moment. They're psychotic or over. So sometimes people are using drugs, alcohol. So the best thing with these situations is just to say, these are the different possibilities, but I'm not going to say one way or the other what I think, right? That is, for example, the approach that I took with regard to the artwork that came out that was supposedly from the daughter of Rex Heuermann, right? I laid out different possibilities and I said I don't commit to any of them, right? Well, that's kind of the idea. You just sort of lay out possibilities. When people will project whatever meaning they want into, and see whatever they want in that neutrality. But the fact of the matter is that it is not wrong to say these are the possibilities. These are the different buckets. Now, as far as which way that we're leaning, it is true that there are some remarks that she has made that are puzzling. There are, for example, parts of the timeline that don't match. There's some strange mismatch in the emotionality. Those things are troubling. But I think in all these cases, including the one I just referenced, I think the best thing to do is reserve judgment and just let the story unfold. The fact is, when people are doing heinous, horrendous things, sometimes the people around them also are victimized and in that sense are quote unquote involved. That doesn't mean that they're doing anything nefarious. We don't know. And sometimes they are. So I just think it's the jury is out. I agree. None of us does. That's the whole thing. I don't care who you talk to. Nobody really could tell you one way or the other. All you're going to get is a lot of people who have a feeling that they project into the, but so
I agree. And as a marriage and family therapist, we always say two people dance together. So I think I understand what you're saying.
Right. Chris, you conquered him. But I will say this. I'm echoing.
Hold on one second. Chris, you're gonna have to turn your echo cancellation on.
Ooh.
It is off.
Chris is joined.
Oh, you have to turn it on now.
Chris, are you joined inside of a tin can? You're inside an iron drum or something?
StreamYard is just the worst.
Ooh.
It's the absolute worst.
My question actually was sparked because of Chris's live that I was watching.
Yeah, a lot of you were. I will say that I want to let Chris jump in then, but I will say that I do think that the knowing that the child was sleeping in the bed with him is very peculiar. I'm very troubled by that. But Chris, wouldn't you say that's an odd piece of info in the Jen Sodo story? Because I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, there's no denying that she knew the child was sleeping in the bed with him, right? No one denied that. So that is peculiar. But as I said, if you're going to keep those buckets, the agnostic buckets, that's great. But it's okay for logic to push you one way or the other. Just keep an open mind. What do you think, Chris? Welcome. Good to see you.
Buc-ee's. He literally has like 1,000 of those shirts. Every time he hits a Buc-ee's, he buys a shirt.
I have.
I love it.
Bucky shirts from everywhere.
I know.
How are you?
He loves Buc-ee's, dude.
Hey, sorry I'm late.
Chris, I know that you just walked into like what the heck is going on. But we were talking about how there's different possibilities for Jen Sodo and how a lot of people are putting her like in the guilty category, and that it's important to also make sure, at least in my opinion, that we also educate people about mental health. This is Dr. Vona, formerly Professor Vona. I'm still a professor, but I've gotten my doctorate degree, so I go by doctor now.
Thank you,
but I think that it's important to let people know about things like bipolar disorder, PTSD. And again, there's many people on the call right now that have both of those things that would never find themselves in these shoes. So then what part of it is like mental capacity? So that was the whole thing. Do you think there's a lane that we could look at where Jennifer, even though she's not mom of the year by any means, that is there a possibility that she didn't know?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm hoping to continue to explore. I mean, did she come to know it right after the fact? And I mean, there's a lot of opinion already that has completely thrown her under the bus, but simultaneously, there was a lot of indications, I'm sure you saw it in that interviews with her, where, she was telling the truth. And I think that trauma bond problem that she may have somewhere in her past, just kind of, she was in denial and she didn't want to grab anything. That's why I think tomorrow I want to explore, I want to hear a lot more about, the fact that she made that one comment in the woods. I kind of want to hear, how did she get to that? Where did that come from? And so I'm going to study that tomorrow.
Is that the one that she said was about where she said about World War III or something?
Yeah, where he went up to his. Yeah, exactly, Doc. That's where he went kind of up towards his parents' house and stuff, and she starts speculating about where there could have been a body dump. So that I thought that was
she does use weird terminology. But wait, as a cop or whatever, don't you think that they were kind of baiting her a little bit? Like, I feel like this is the thing. I feel like if she is, let's say she had no idea, and I know that they did a great job. I agree with you on all of that. But let's assume that she didn't know. Would you think in that case that could be a little bit traumatic, the way that they interrogated her?
I think they slowly turned up the dial. And when they got to the place,
he was like, "I don't believe you."
Yeah. When they got to the place where they didn't get the result that they thought they were going to get, that's when he's that where I kind of left off, where he leaned back and he was like, that's not the result I was expecting. So that's why tomorrow I want to hear a little bit more about looking into, has that statement been made before? And if so, by who? And did she pick it up, inadvertently? Did he tell her that? Did she have some type of knowledge?
I have that written in my notes.
I'm sorry?
No, I have that written in my notes. And it was ironic that you said about trauma bonding, because that was one of the first things I said. I said, it's likely that Jennifer had developed a trauma bond with Burns over years where she felt emotionally attached to him despite his harmful behavior. So when people are subjected to long-term emotional abuse, they often become dependent on their abuser, making it difficult to see them for who they really are.
Yeah, 100%. And I've had cases, and you've probably counseled them, Doc, where, children, right? Moms who've lost children and the suspects are the husbands or the fathers. And, over the year, maybe 2-3 years, they witness the abuse. Then ultimately it just goes too far and the child's killed. And you sit down with the mother, as you know, more than anybody, and you go, well, how did you not see this? And that they saw it. And eventually they say, well, I was very aware of it, but I had no place to go. I had nothing to do. He would have killed me. And the list just goes on. And so now you're kind of in a situation, right? Where
Chris, let's be clear. Just in case we get misconstrued by people, we're not saying that that's an excuse. We're simply saying that it helps you understand the dynamics where that might be going on, how in that person's mind, and we don't know what went on here. We don't know what category this falls into. But I think we would agree that there are some right now, there are definitely some head scratching moments and statements that she's made.
I mean, the question is, how deep was Jen? I don't think she's involved in the murder. That is my personal opinion. Just looking at this thing right now, was she complacent in relationship to denial and all this other stuff? Yes, no question about it. Was she enabling? No question about it. But now the question behind that is, what's the motive behind that? What's the motive behind that?
I feel so validated. Thank you, because I felt like I was on an island by myself. I do not think she gets Mother of the Year award, and I also think that she is less than smart in a lot of her decision making. However, I don't think that makes her, complicit. And I also think that, if she wasn't complicit, what's worse than, as you would know, losing a child? Like, she has to live with that forever.
Yeah, I had a case one time where a child, cigarettes were used, and the mother responded to me, but they weren't mine.
Oh,
I mean, that's terrible.
That's deep.
That's
That's
crazy.
it really is. It really is.
But that's reality, right, Doc?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
Dr.
I-
Gary and everybody, the caller.
Right. Well, people are asking in the audience
Yeah.
what is meant by the phrase trauma bonding. They're
You
not
got to
sure.
explain that.
It's being
Okay.
My noodles.
I mean,
do you want to take that?
yeah, I think we'll take it, but maybe we should probably wrap up on this.
Yeah, we'll answer that on the other side. And I thank you for your
Sure.
call.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'll get to your email that you sent me.
God bless you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
No, I just
Thank you, Dr. Gary. That means
okay. I think the quickest way to answer it is simply to say that it involves a dynamic in which a person comes to feel attached to a person that is abusing them. And the idea is that in the periods of calmness in the abuse, in the cycle, the person can feel loved or protected, or that there's predictability that then is mistaken for a safe place to attach. And then they make excuses for the person when the person is abusing them, or they just take it.
Is that like Stockholm?
Well, that has a similar quality, and there are different theories about, the evolutionary construct of why a person does that. I mean, think, for example, if you're a little kid and you're raised in a home where you're being abused, the problem is that if you don't adapt to connect to your parents,
Yeah, who else is going to take care of you?
take care of you, right? So evolutionarily, we bond with these people, we develop dopaminergic kind of connections to them, and then the rest of our lives, we think, because dopamine is firing every time somebody's abusing us like they did, that's love, that's happiness, that's predictability, and so when you see people that are in these repetitively abusive dynamics, you do have to wonder, what the prototype was for that. Where did they internalize the idea that love equates to someone who, is technically taking care of you sometimes, but is basically awful to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, and cults can have that same quality. A cult, as I always say, is essentially a large-scale abusive relationship. So whenever you have a person that's culty, think P. Diddy, that has a culty quality, the people around them are just basically, unable to see their faults because they've been sucked into this idea that they think the person is somebody special or great or taking care of them or powerful or whatever. So they just they have these blinders to how abused they're being. And, that's what happens essentially in a cult situation. And of course, anybody on the outside looks and says, how could you love this person? How could you like this awful person? It's treating you like garbage. But the person has blinders on because they only notice when the person is pretending to be nice every once in a while, right?
Well, it's why people beg for the attention of their parents when their parents don't give it to them, or when their parents treat them horribly. You still have an overwhelming desire to please your parents and get their approval, even though they're not doing right by you. I mean, that is a bond that is. It's really hard to sever those bonds, but sometimes it's necessary too. But that's just.
It's very depressing that it happens, but it happens quite often. And there are a lot of people who don't even realize that they're trauma bonded. Like the person who said, I just called up I don't know, I'm making this up, called up my mom, my dad, and I told them I was having a rough day at work. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, you idiot, you always do everything wrong. Can't you just do a job and not get in trouble? And I know that's kind of mean, but they love me, and they want what's best for me. Well, then I think to myself, my God, how many times have they had this conversation where the person is just bopping them on the head over and over, insulting them until they internalize it. But because the person's their parent, they think it's acceptable. Right. And this happens more than people want to realize. There are a lot of people who are bonded to people that are supposed to love them in that way, where the person is just beating them on the head all the time, insulting them, knocking them down, blaming them, externalizing their own issues to them, etc. And then you get these very exaggerated versions where the person is flat out physically abusing you or sexually. It's not just emotional. But there are a lot of people that are softly emotionally abused and don't even realize it. That happens too.
Right.
I mean, I had it happen one time that I was sitting in a diner and I was overhearing a couple where the guy was flat out emotionally abusing the person, you know, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, that happens sometimes. So, you know, but people don't realize it, that they get caught up in a relationship, they make excuses, they, you know, they must love me on some level, whatever. But then when you actually lay out what's being said to them, they're being repetitively bopped on the head with a message that they're not worthy, they're not good enough, they're incompetent, everything is their fault, they're an idiot, they, you know, they don't know what they're doing. What would you do without me? You know, and Josh, you know these kind of people that do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all too familiar with them, and you know, I guess you could say the gaslighting of, you know, people that seem to be kind of under somebody else's thumb because either they count on them for, you know, survival, you know, like
Right.
It's exactly like the P. Diddy situation, or Cuff Daddy as we're calling him these days, because what he would do is he would financially insert himself into people's lives, and then when they would want out, you say, okay, well, there goes the money, and then if that didn't work, then it seemed to be
Right.
physical.
But that's, now you see, you say something very clever. Step one, I have studied these people that get into bonds that are culty with people. So as I always say, cult is a large-scale abusive dynamic. So this is true of a small one or a cult. But the idea is the first thing you need to do is love bomb the individual into thinking that you care about them in a special way and that only you could take care of them. And how do you do that? You create intimacy in the us against them dynamic. You praise them endlessly, tell them how fabulous they are when everyone else thinks they're an idiot. And then, you know, that's what you tell them, that everyone thinks that. And then what you do is you create a problem. You say, those people don't know how serious this problem is. And if I don't solve that problem, you're all screwed, right? So you have to create a problem, and then
Right.
you put the idea in the person's head that there's this thing they have to be nervous about, that if you don't come in with a cape and save them from it, right. So sometimes the person creates the very problem that they claim they're going to solve. And that happens to people in abusive dynamics, is that what they're doing is they're making you feel like a fool. So then you think that you have to go out and do all kinds of things to earn their trust and love back.
Maybe Koresh did it to everything. Well, the government's coming after us, and if you don't take up arms, you know, we're gonna.
Right, you can extend it into that kind of thing, and that happens too. Yeah. But the point is that it's all about you create a boogeyman that the cult person or the abuser, you need them, right? So think of the movie Carrie. The mother, played by Piper Laurie, is abusing the daughter, played by Sissy Spacek, right? So in order to not lose the daughter, who's totally dependent on her, she tells the daughter, they're all going to laugh at you. They're all going to laugh at you. There's there's evil stuff going on, and they all want to hurt you, right? So you create this boogeyman. You make a dependency situation where the daughter is never going to leave because she thinks you're the only one who knows, and she's the only one who's going to protect you. But of course, at the end of the movie, she realizes that the mother's the center of the whole thing. So the mother's the one that's making her weird. So that's what I think you want to understand about those kind of people, is they're very powerful. Yeah. It's not that easy to escape them. It's very easy on the outside to judge the person. But once you're totally dependent on them financially and in other ways, it's not that easy. Chris, did you ever talk to a battered or abused spouse or a partner, and you say, you got to get out of there, and they say, anywhere I go, he's going to find me.
Yeah.
If I go to the shelter, he's going to kill me. He's going to find me. He's going to kill me. He's going to hurt my kid. I can't do it. I might as well just lay there and let him abuse me because I can't deal with it. It's too scary. You've been there, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're trapped.
And you
mentally,
it's
emotionally,
terrible.
Spiritually.
Right.
It's all there.
All right, we got a full call. We got a full panel call. So let's go ahead and take.
But it can be done. It can be done. Don't lose hope. There are wonderful organizations that are there to help people in those scenarios.
And let's see, 617.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Who's this?
Hi. This is Ms. Marple.
Oh,
The interview
Hi, Miss
woman.
Marvel.
we know you from the
Gary,
show.
and now you, John.
How are you?
I'm kind of vocal, I guess.
Yes, I love Miss Marple, the
I
Agatha.
had a question.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
She's a great favorite. Yes.
I've been wondering. I'm sorry, what?
I said she's a great favorite of mine, so I appreciate that you named yourself after her.
Oh, I am a great fan, and I so appreciate your insights. They're incredible. And you too, Chris. They've been wonderful. So tonight was outstanding. But anyway, I was thinking to myself, because of my age, I guess, I've been around a few decades, that what seems to be a factor today in a lot of these mass murders or spree murders, whatever, is I sense a sense of entitlement. Because I often find myself talking to the TV or whatever and saying, who do you think you are? That you're allowed to just express all your anxiousness by taking out other people. You can't find any other way of dealing with this or that in life other than to take out a bunch of people, especially children, like in Sandy Hook. That do either of you get a sense about that?
Well, to quote Sherlock Holmes, what a unique delight it is to meet someone with a mind as logical as yours. Well, I think that, yes, of course, you hit right on the center of the whole Tootsie Roll Pop, which is that in the era in which we are living, the prohibition or the kibosh that used to be put on emoting any thought that shot up the spinal column, anything that shot up the any impulse that shot up the spinal column would be kind of inhibited because it wasn't acceptable culturally, has been lifted. So that now we're living in a time when any emotion you have, got to be me, got to be free, even if the emotion has to do with emoting in the public square with a firearm. And, and that's a very serious problem. I agree with you that it has to be cultural, or those mass shootings would happen in every single place across history when those firearms were available in every country at equal rates, and they do not, which means that it must be cultural. And I do think it has something to do with the lifting of the kibosh that there used to be on expressing one's individuality and emotionality in that way. And Chris, wouldn't you say that that's a sort of weird side effect of the modern era, is that people take the self-expression and the selfishness of the time all the way into violence? And I think, Chris, I'd like to hand that to you to see what you think. I know you have a lot of thoughts on that too, but I think it's a very clever point.
It's a very clever point, and I appreciate you bringing that up there. My feeling, and all three of us have talked about this behind the scenes, about we've lost a sense of civility to one another. And I don't, I think these devices have disconnected us to the point where, it's easy to assault somebody verbally, now through space, literally through space. You type a couple of words, it goes to a satellite, comes back down, hits another phone. But the anomaly in that is the fact that we are now living in a time where countries are regulating social scores. Like, the communist countries, China, for an example, if you're not socially in line, then, you get penalized. But just think about that thought process. A country is trying to regulate behavior to the point where it has to be one way or there will be no other way. And yet we see in the Western world this idea that says, say and do, feel, become anything, anyone, anywhere you feel you want. It's about feelings versus you, but it's about your feelings. It's not about your society's feelings or your neighbor's feelings.
Right.
And to your point, where you're watching it and you're going, who do you think you are? We didn't have that in our time, right? Where it was about the golden rule, treat your neighbor as that's right. And that rule, I think, no, you're fine. We love you. I think we've had a paradigm shift in our society to the point where violence now, look what happened last night. 4 dead, 21 shot in Alabama, and it made the news for about 10 minutes. And
I didn't hear that. Oh my goodness.
You know what I mean? And it's
the point.
Yeah, exactly. That's I didn't hear about it till this afternoon.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but that's all about, what's the reality behind that? I'm going to be a betting man here and tell you it's gang related. And they just shot each other up. But the point being, we just don't have the civility right now. I don't know what's happening, but we have 5 grandkids, and I tell my children all the time, just look around you. You don't know what's going on out there anymore. Be careful. Mm-hmm. And as you know, my son, he's a professor at UNLV. He went to work, and that guy came through the hallway shooting and killing people. It was crazy. He could have been one.
Yeah, no question about
it.
But
what a great caller. Thanks.
I know there are many factors, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, folks.
We appreciate your call. Thank you so much.
What I thought was so...
enjoy the show so much.
All right, thank you.
What I think is so important about what the caller did is they took a conversation that for most people is going to stay at the level of the scientific and the biological. And they pulled the curtain away and they said, actually, the center of it is moral. That you could give it any psychiatric or biological label you want, but at the end of the day, it's a kind of pride. And I think that by doing that, they revealed themselves, I think, to really get the heart of the matter. That this is a thing that is uniquely human. That is why I greatly resent when people compare these offenders to animals. He's an animal. No, he's not. An animal would not enjoy.
I think about that a lot. I think about that a lot too.
Kill to kill. A lion doesn't come into a therapist's office and lay down on the chaise, and say, "Listen, I'm going through this existential crisis. I'm so depressed. I think I'm just going to go into the town square and eat some people. I'm envious. No, they just kill predatorily to eat, and that's it. There's no exaggerated torture, playing out of weird fantasies, leveling the playing field from childhood, whatever. That's human crap. And pride, I'm making a play on words using a lion as the example, but pride is, I think, a purely human construct, and that is at the heart of it. What you say, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, don't you think we've had a paradigm shift in our social networks out there? I mean, yeah. We've got people that are probably watching this program right now who just want to hate. And they get off on it. That's a new phenomenon. That's always been, but it hasn't been that bad. And it's I don't know if it's anger or if it's that's your lane. But I can tell you what, it's job security for the security sectors out there Whoops. Did Josh go again? Gary?
I don't know. Three
Welcome
little
to the lab, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. Oh, let's guess. It's Otis.
I don't know what it is. Just give me a second.
Remember the song Three Little Indians out on a canoe. One fell overboard, and then there were two.
Yep, and there's about to be just one dog in the house shortly. You're right.
But
No,
anyway, don't you think?
Very important point. Yes. Yes, I agree with you, Chris. There's been a paradigm.
Well, what's happened to this ability to agree sometimes or disagree sometimes? I mean, it's absolutely...
Well, the real question, I think, to get to the heart of it is, what is it that used to make people inhibit themselves? It was culture basically putting the kibosh on it. Certain spiritual and philosophical ideas people had where they were afraid of spiritual consequences, right? And some of it just has to do with the idea that it's been so normalized that we're numb to it. So it's like we're all completely traumatized, desensitized to it. It's like living in a war zone, mixed with the changes in the philosophical underpinnings of the culture. Whatever you believe about them, they acted as a kind of glue. And this, kind of cultural kibosh being lifted. You put those three together and you wind up in a very dangerous soup. And I'm not sure that the genie could be put back in the bottle at this point, right?
No, the Chinese, they have the system, right? You get a social score. And if you don't hit your social score, then they take away your ability to travel. They take away your ability to work. And I'll give you a simple example. If you jaywalk in China, in Hong Kong, or wherever you're going to be over there, and if you jaywalk, they put your picture up right there at the crosswalk and they publicly shame you. And then your social score through AI and facial intelligence immediately identifies you, beep, and then it beep, puts it up, and everybody around that's walking across that crosswalk can see you weren't playing the game. And that's like nuts. That's canceling people on steroids.
right.
It's crazy.
But that's why
our society doesn't get there.
But I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle. I think there used to be a song I guess about 80 or 90 years ago that said, "How are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris?" Well, it's kind of like that. Once you've been out of out in the world and you've been able to do whatever you want, you're not going back to the farm. It's not happening.
Gary.
And so I don't think the culture is going back ever again.
Dr. Gary, there was also a song about 20 years ago called "Genie in a Bottle."
Yes, I know it. Yes.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Yes, I like her. She's a character. So, great. But okay, so let's take another call. I think. But
all righty, let's see. 862. You're on the air.
Mm-hmm.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
What's your name?
So this is Jen from Jersey. I called you guys the other night. Thank you again for doing this. Jen from Jersey. So I went through a traumatic event like we all do. It was about 6.5 years ago. Firstly, going to say I never went to therapy for it. Dr. Gary, I just wanted to know if you can let me and the audience know what exactly are some of the symptoms that trauma actually does to your brain. Because my memory has been affected so badly that it's actually scary sometimes.
You're talking about trauma that occurs to a person as a child or later in life?
Yeah, Well, I'll use me as an example. So I can't sleep. I sleep for 2 hours at a time. My memory, such memory loss since this has happened. Not about the event that happened. My boyfriend was murdered 6.5 years ago. I wasn't there.
Sorry to hear that.
But since it happened, I've such memory loss of just like my childhood, present day, and it's like it scares me sometimes. I was just wondering, like, what trauma actually does to your brain.
Well, the essence of trauma is that it keeps a person stuck in the past, in a state of alarm, as if they are limbically, emotionally reacting to something happening now, even though it happened a long time ago, right? And the whole idea is you have to imagine a brain that's pumping with stress hormones, that certain brain areas associated with alarm or terror or memory are affected because the person is living in yesterday as if it's now. And what happens in that state of alarm is that it's difficult to pay attention to what you should pay attention to remember things the way that you should remember things, to internally be drawn to associations that don't make sense to other people because you're linking things to the trauma. Then there's a kind of overgeneralization of stimuli. So, for example, you're in Vietnam, you hear bombs going off, and for decades, every time you hear a car back up or a firework go off, you jump because you think it's a bomb. You overgeneralize, right? So, like, for example, I have talked to people who have heard gunshots, and Josh, you've heard gunshots, right? Right. And don't you ever have a reaction when you hear a loud sound that you get like a startle reaction, or your first thought is gun, but it's like it's not a gun.
Yeah, the backfires of vehicles and stuff like that. It actually has kind of like gone down the older I've gotten. But when I was younger, I would hear police sirens, and I would run inside because I was scared, because I just remember police sirens being not a good thing. They weren't coming near us at the time.
Interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, I would hear these, and that was a huge issue for me. Police, emergency vehicles in general, and so yeah, I know.
Right.
I know that kind
So
of.
Josh, you still do go through that, even though it's a little less than when you were little.
It has lessened over the years significantly. I have worked at it significantly, and then time also has a way of sort of, I wouldn't say it heals. You're never cured, but it helps. Time does.
Right.
There's no question about that. But yes.
Well,
It's funny that it's not funny, haha, but funny. Last night there was fireworks going off in a distance, like in probably a town over. They weren't so loud, and I thought there were gunshots, and I wasn't there when he was. I don't even like to say the word, when he was murdered.
Right.
And just the sound, I wasn't even there, but the sound, and I'm like, is that what I think it is?
Right. Because to the traumatized person.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even there, and
right.
I'm just associating like everything. I guess everything. So I guess I'm stuck in. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't want to make any interpretations about a mental health situation, because you can't do that without knowing a person. Yeah. But what I think is, in general terms, the way to think about trauma is having a kind of an emotional alarm, setting a brain off as if the past is now, and it's not being integrated into past, into memory. It feels like fresh. And so everything that's going on is just, the brain is still in that moment, jumping, being alarmed, being terrified, as if that is still now. And losing someone the way that you did is a special kind of trauma. I always said after my father passed away that whenever I'd meet a person and they would tell me that they had lost someone, I felt a special bond with them because they understood something that you do not get unless you've gone through a loss of a person you love. It separates. It's sort of like the way that you have BC and AD, you know, or BCE and AD, they say now, or you know, but the idea being that time is broken in half. There's everything before that event and after.
Yep.
And after that event, just kind of, you're just getting by past that event, right? And you understand that if you have not lost a loved one, and there's not one person here in this group who doesn't know that experience. It's part of the thing that has bonded us.
Yeah.
And so believe me, we understand that you love this person. They're there with you, and the next minute they're gone.
A lot of that too, Dr. Gary, it's funny that you say that because there are conversations that my family regularly has, and they'll be talking about a point in time and they'll say, well, depending on who's talking about it, well, that was before Sue was killed, which was my mother, or that was after Sue was killed.
Now.
And there's this absolute divide in time when they were just
it is so true.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And
Gary, when you just mentioned about your dad, I'm gonna cry because I lost my mom 18 years ago from cancer, and I just when someone at work mentions their mom, I literally have to leave the room because I just still. Sorry for crying.
That's okay.
Like if someone says mom, it just makes me.
I know.
And it's been 18 years, you know.
Of course. Well, look, the reason that it still hurts is that love never dies. That you still feel the person's there loving you, and they never will die. Because that's the thing that should always feel like it's here now. That never goes away. But so that I think, you know, that's part of the thing, right? Is that the love of the person, it's like in the room, always.
Chris.
Yeah.
Had you, you know, and I hate to bring up, but since we're all sharing, does the pain that you went through losing a son? I mean, it never stops.
No, it never goes away. It'll always be here. But
yep,
you know,
feel the same way.
Like everybody else. I mean, we have a Gethsemane, and unfortunately, you know, I don't think you don't ever get used to it. I mean, this has been a really interesting year for me, obviously, because, you know, it's 21 years this year. September 3rd was 21 years. And it's much different. You know, I lost my mother in 1984. So that's 40. It's been 40 years for her. And then, you know, et cetera. And then Ryan in 2003, September 3rd. But this year was much different than the other 20. Maybe it's because I realized for the very first time, you know, he's been gone longer than he was alive. And so it was a whole new transition for me.
Oh, yeah.
And, but to answer your question, it just didn't go away.
And that's, I dealt with that same thing. I said on the show the other day, you know, when I turned 23, it was a whole new ball game. You know, it was like, I would just look around and go, I can't imagine this being it, you know, 23. And, you know, I can always, for some reason, and I think that's just how people are in general. And caller, I want to thank you for your call. We got more
thank
calls.
you for your call. But what you have to do.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
No, it's very beautiful that you shared this.
Because you have to start wearing Bucky shirts.
They'll cheer you right up.
Just to kind of get through that wall.
Good night.
Get through that wall.
And you know, Chris, when you were talking just now, I found myself realizing, you know, how scary it must have been that you almost lost another son in this terrible shooting, and instead he was spared and was a hero.
Yes.
But I mean, there's no question about it. Listen, they don't put the heroes in the newspaper like they should. But as far as I'm concerned, your son is the reason that quite a number of people are alive in that building.
I don't get invited to very many dinner parties. Let me put it to you that way, because
Right.
And maybe that's what made me a good investigator, is not tooting my own horn, but I always had, and I'm grateful for it, that God has given me this gift of empathy, I guess, or compassion. I don't know what it is, but I think it is all related to all the things I've seen and been through, like the next person. So,
yes,
I mean, beautifully said. You have one thing that I've always noticed about you is you have a unique ability to listen before you talk. You listen to the other person. You do that quite often. And
don't tell my mom.
but you seem to take it all in, so
yeah.
I've always noticed that about you, and I think that's one of many reasons that you've always been a great investigator as well. So let's go ahead and take the next call here. 860, where are you calling from? What's your name?
I think that's me. Miss Poppy McGill.
Hey, how are you?
Top of the morning.
I'm good. I'm really excited to be able to have the three of you to talk to. I'm one of those people that could listen to Dr. Gary for hours and hours.
I do.
Don't tell that to my mom.
I do sometimes. It's not all that great. No, I'm just kidding. It is. That's for the brain damage comment that everybody keeps bringing up.
That's so funny. Chris, Josh, please. Yeah. That was a joke. I like the hairdo.
Just kidding.
I wanted to ask what Chris and Dr. Gary, what you thought about in recent some of the younger people that have some of the school shootings, Crumbly, and then this new kid, Colt Gray, that school shootings, that they're bringing parents in and holding them responsible, and what you think that might do, if that'll make any type of change. I as somebody who's researched, I live in Connecticut and did a lot of research on Adam Lanza and the Sandy Hook shootings, and learned a lot about him. And I really think had he not shot his mother, that she might have been somebody that might have been held accountable in some way, because she watched him. She became more and more complacent with his odd behavior, and still continued to have so many weapons in the house that it was absolutely ridiculous. And as she watched him, he pushed his father out of his life, and it was really just the two of them. So I'm just wondering if you think that's going to have a difference in where things are going.
I think I'm gonna hand this question to Chris, because we've talked about this in different places. And
not only have we talked about it, we debated it deeply.
We've deeply debated it, yes, and I really think
we all feel different.
We all feel differently. So I'm going to let Chris take that one. Go ahead, Chris. Go to town on it.
Oh boy. All right, I'm going to be very careful, but simultaneously very blunt.
Yes, but before you do, put on a helmet.
I will. Everybody, buckle up.
Right, because I know you have very strong opinions about this. So
we're gonna go for a ride.
Yes, I'm going to mute myself and go stand.
Buckle up. Put your buckies on, your seat buckies. All right. First of all, condolences to anyone who's ever lost anyone through gun violence. Number one. Okay. But we have a mental health crisis in this country. And the mental health crisis is not being handled correctly. I was on the street early on when we had mental health facilities. CMH is what they used to call it, County Mental Health. And you were able to take somebody to this facility and have them checked in or get them, taken care of. When our county mental health system collapsed, then we started to see gun violence go through the roof. And that gun violence has now turned into an epidemic of gun violence, depending on where you live. But here's, I guess, where my point is. I have never, ever arrested an AR-15. I have always arrested the operator of that weapon. And to your point, the caller, you've studied the young man that went down there and did that horrendous act of violence. But they didn't put the gun in prison. Well, he's dead, but they wouldn't have put the gun in prison. Nor would they have put the gun in prison in Las Vegas, who fired at, hundreds of people. Now, to me, that's the issue. Now, are all crazy gunmen? The whole reason Gary has a book is because those people were nuts. All 22 categories. And if they weren't, they wouldn't be in his book. Okay? And that also, there's the other side of that. There's a mental health crisis as to how they earn themselves a spot in the book. But the tools utilized, it doesn't matter if it was paper cups, somebody would have figured out. And then I guess this is kind of where, we've had some colorful conversations, the three of us, about at some point, anybody will figure out a way to hurt somebody else. And it doesn't matter if you look at the statistics in England, they have more homicides by knives than I think a lot of other countries. But everybody touts, well, yeah, but they don't have guns. Well, yeah, but they're killing people with knives. And the same in Australia, the same in Canada. They're mowing people down with, cars. They're hitting them with whatever. If it was paper cups, they'd figure out a way to, suffocate somebody. So until the politicians or until somebody decides to put the mental health crisis back in order. I mean, just think in the early, Gary, I mean, you keep statistics on this stuff. How many mass murders with weapons, with guns, before James Huberty in San Diego? Approximately.
I'd have to look in the database to give you an exact number, but let's just say they were extremely infrequent at that time. They became especially frequent in the United States after Columbine. And in particular, in the past decade or so, they're ratcheting up. There is a kind of a cultural thing going on, I think. But yes, Huberty was like one of the quintessential, like almost a blueprint of how these occur, right? The going postal kind of thing, right? That people like John Douglas analyzed and came up with this idea. Remember all the grievances he had and the paranoia and the holding a grudge and then going. But I think, to your point, yeah, right. And we have to remember that the definition of serious mental illness is the trouble, right? Because when someone like me says serious mental illness, I'm talking about psychosis, hearing voices, being thought disordered, having a delusional belief. And that's quite rare in mass shooting incidents, right? And it's rarer in mass shootings than it is in mass murder by other mechanisms. In my own work, we've shown that. So that what it looks like is that the phrase mental health crisis, if what you mean by that is people with personality problems, coping issues, despair, anger, etc., then there's certainly a mental health pandemic, right? Drugs, alcohol. But what most people mean when they say it, the image of the deranged guy going out and, this is actually quite rare and something of a myth. But if what you mean is the kind of thing you're talking about, the emotional crisis, well, then, of course, everybody who goes out and takes a weapon and commits some act of violence publicly has some degree of disturbance. I mean, it's not a normal behavior, certainly not a normal coping mechanism on the bell curve of behavior. But I think the problem is this. If you do define it, that these children, the Crumbleys of the world and the Colts of the world, and it drives me up a wall that the kid's name is the name of a firearm. But if Colt, and Crumbly were minors and did these things and had emotional problems, then it's no different than a situation where a parent is not properly taking care of a kid who's psychiatrically disturbed, and the state or somebody steps in and says, you don't have the resources or the capacity to do this. We have to take matters into our hands, investigate it, like when you call Child Protective Services or something like that. Then, because if you're treating someone and they have a minor child and they're unwell to the point that they can't take care of their kid and their kid takes a firearm to school, you would investigate that, yes. But I think, Chris, what you're talking about is a situation where there's like a knee-jerk reaction that if a kid commits an act of violence, that it couldn't have happened without the parent being involved in some way. And I think that's tricky because sometimes they do it without any knowledge at all. So I think it's a case-by-case thing. But I hope we'll agree, maybe I'm wrong, but if they did know and they ignored it, that is very troubling. It would be no less troubling if they were purposely not giving the person mental health treatment they needed, or they were ignoring that the kid was getting in trouble repetitively at school or not going to school, or etc. I just think that's a parenting issue. But what do you think about that, about viewing it through the lens of if it's a kind of lapse in judgment with regard to taking care of a child, then I can understand somebody being held to account. What do you think about that?
Well, if every kid ODs, you're going to hold the parent accountable?
Well, this opens up a very interesting debate. I mean, Josh, what do you think?
I think that I don't look at this situation as, or the whole situation, the Crumbly situation and the Colt situation. I think that they're different. I think
Right.
that each of these cases are different, and to paint it with a broad brush, to me, doesn't really do any good. I think that in the Crumbly case, his parents are less culpable than, say, in the case that just happened in Appalachia High School, because of the FBI interference. But, Chris has also brought up a good point too, is, well, does it constitute a crime? I mean, what's going to happen in this situation is they're going to be pushed to the limit of testing the boundaries of the law, and it's gonna be a fight, because you have to be able to charge somebody with an actual crime that fits the definition of a crime, not just because you want to. Chris, you told me, you said, how many people I've wanted to put in jail that I couldn't do it because the law didn't allow me to. I agree with that.
Well, let's say, just as a thought experiment, let's say a parent said, look, son, you're not old enough to drive and you don't have a license, but I think just for fun, take the Cadillac for a spin. Kid takes the car keys at 13, 14 years old, has no idea what he's doing, and drives the car right into the neighbor and kills them. Is the parent liable? Well, the parent should have known that the child has no idea how to drive, is not of age, has no license, it's against the law, and the parent made a decision that directly led to the death of another person. So I can understand in that situation a person being charged with manslaughter. And I guess that's the argument. So Chris, what would you feel about that, the car analogy? I'm really interested in your answer to that, because that's what I think makes me see what they're thinking in the charge. That's how it's being seen, just like that.
Well, you're taking away individual accountability. And the law, remember, Lady Justice has three things. She has a sword, a blindfold, and scale. Okay. All three of those represents three sides of, potential personality. So how does the parent form the intent to drive into the neighbor's house and kill them?
Well, I think it's complicated because the way the law interprets it. No, I mean, just to answer that, because I can never give a short answer to anything because everything's so complicated. I'm too professorial, I guess. But I think the trouble is that it's a complicated comparison because in our culture, we interpret
it was your comparison, not mine.
I know, but this is the thing. If you're going to ask that question, the trouble is it's a little bit of a little trick, a debate trick, because the problem is in our culture, if you're a minor, we don't believe that you have the capacity to make an adult decision. The adult is making the decision for you. That's why you can't vote and you can't drink and you can't have certain, adult relations and so forth. They don't have the capacity to make that independent decision. So if the parent says, take these car keys and go drive, and the kid is breaking the law because they don't have a license and they run someone over, who are they going to blame?
The parents.
So, right. So that's where, Josh, Chris, you make a really interesting point, but then I get stuck on how it's not the same as giving the kid the car keys and the kid runs someone over. I don't know. I get your point. You're saying, well, the parent isn't the one that pulled the trigger. And this is where I think we're getting stuck.
Okay, here's
the car thing is an accident. The pulling the trigger is not. That's the difference. Right.
Okay, let's just right. The gun thing is a whole
other animal.
A whole nother animal. Okay. Yeah. Right. Let's say you have a party and your parents have told you, we're leaving for the weekend, don't have a party.
Right.
And the teenage son or daughter says, okay, mom, okay, dad, I won't have a party. And the moment they leave, there are 40 kids in your house. One of those kids has an OD'd on alcohol and has alcohol poisoning.
Yes.
And he dies. And they forget to roll him over. Remember in high school, they used to tell you, make sure you roll them over. So if they're thrown up, they don't choke on their own problem. Okay. All right. The cops show up. Ambulance shows up. Everybody shows up. The parents come home. Dead kid in their living room. Do you arrest them?
Now let me think this through. This thought experiment through. Did the parents understand? That's complicated because having a party where a kid could get really stupid and something could happen is a lot more complicated than foreseeing what could go wrong giving an AR-15 to a 13-year-old. That's very different. So my brain struggles to get around it.
We're talking about the Appalachia situation.
Right. But if you're talking about
the FBI come in.
No, I'm talking about the result.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're just saying, Chris, in other words, if something goes wrong, how could the parent have foreseen? How were they the one that pulled the trigger or gave the drugs to the kid or whatever? Why should they be blamed? But I think the way the law is seeing it is that they have. It's kind of like if I don't salt the steps, and and someone living in my building slips down and cracks their head open, they can sue me because I should have read the weather report, seen that there was going to be bad snow, and that somebody could or ice, and somebody could have gotten hurt. I'm negligent. So I think it's a kind of negligence to not take into consideration the possibility of a bunch of dumb kids that are in a house having a party. A lot could go wrong. And I guess I get your point, though. One of the things I love about our conversations is that none of us thinks we're any smarter than the other. I learn from the two of you. And I think you're right, Chris. You make a really good point, and I think a lot of people on a jury are going to think exactly the same way. But I guess what I'm saying is, from the angle of the law, if you're a prosecutor, I could see making a case that it's manslaughter. I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious.
Manslaughter is a crime of passion with specific intent. A manslaughter is taking a gun and shooting a bullet up into the air, okay? and knowing that bullet's got to come down, and it hits somebody in the head, hypothetically, okay. Right. But you have to have the intent to pull the trigger for that bullet to go up in the air. That's part of the elements of the crime. Okay. If the parents say, look, I called the school that morning, which the mother said she did, and I told them, my son is unstable today. I'm warning you, this is not good. Okay. And next thing you know, the kid comes through the door as crazy as he is and mows everybody down. Okay. Do you hook the mother up?
Well, Chris, this is complicated because as I understand manslaughter,
it never used to be complicated until they just arrested her.
Well, the way I understand manslaughter is that you're responsible for a homicide, but you didn't have malice aforethought.
Well, then why read the kid Miranda rights? If he didn't have a choice, the greatest gift given unto us is life. Second unto that is the ability to choose. Yeah, what do we want to do? And if all of our choices go back to somebody else around us, then, wow, put your seatbelts on because it's coming.
Well, but there's a big difference.
I'd agree, but it's a little kid who can't make those decisions.
Yeah, but there's a difference between manslaughter and then you have aggravated manslaughter. And so if you want to just talk about manslaughter, then yeah, that may not fit the definition. But if there are situations surrounding a case like in the Appalachia situation, and there were, I would say, different circumstances than we've ever dealt with before. You could absolutely make a case for aggravated manslaughter against the father. Now, I'm not saying it'll stick, but I'm saying that, that it's a much more serious offense than just manslaughter, because manslaughter, there's no intent, right? I mean, there's no real intent, but when it comes to aggravated manslaughter, there are circumstances that lead up to that maybe could have been changed.
Now, here's intent. Hey, son, here's this Colt rifle because I like your name. Okay.
Right. Make sure you had an honor of one. Right.
Make sure you get down to the school and shoot it up. Give me a call when you're done.
That's intent. I agree 100%.
No, that's first degree murder.
Thank you. It's not. Yeah, it could be first. Yeah, that too. But either way, it shows malice aforethought.
Yes.
Which is intent to commit murder. It shows mens rea, which is an evil mind. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it shows that you put it into action.
So that's beyond manslaughter, because manslaughter doesn't require the malice.
Well, manslaughter requires intent to kill. And so the father can't if the father handed him a rifle and said, here's your rifle, son, make sure you get down there and shoot people. Yeah, we got a problem in River City, and you can charge that parent 100%.
But the father was warned that the kid had an intention to do it, and then for Christmas bought him a firearm.
Yeah, but here's the other side to that. Okay, if the parents knew 100% that he was going to do that, okay, and did not intervene, I agree with you. Yeah, it could be problematic, but here's the situation. Here is the facts on the ground. Hello, yes, my son is unstable today. You need to get on this. Hello, click, 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 click. Okay.
Yeah, but that doesn't
And
take
now-
anything away from the dad.
You're
Well,
talking about the mother did that. The mother called and said that.
Well, that's what the mother says, right?
What she said.
Okay, but then why is she in custody? I'm telling you, the Supreme
can't
Court
prove
is
she
going
said
to kick this case out the door, and every American is going to
Was
go.
the mother was the mother arrested?
Yes, the mother's been arrested. So is the father.
So, Chris,
Yeah.
you're interpreting it that it's more like if a father says, "Here, son, here's a book of matches. Use it to, I don't know, light the stove," and the kid takes the match out and commits arson. The parent could not possibly have known that the kid was going to use a tool in that way.
Well,
But
look at Brandon Wilson, Gary. He stood behind his mother, right, at 16, and he was going to kill her. He was going to cut her throat. Okay?
Right, I know.
Because she was having an affair with somebody at the school, and it was embarrassing him. Okay. All right. So he goes 4 or 5 years later into the bathroom and slaughters Matthew Checky.
No, I hate that story.
Do I arrest the mother?
No.
Why not?
Situation, no.
Principle. Why not?
Because this is a situation where I don't think that a parent is completely clueless of the danger of the situation at the time they're giving the gun at Christmas time, because they were warned that the person had specific homicidal fantasies.
But that's where the
the
aggravated manslaughter comes in, because
And that's where the
reckless
mental health
behavior that
system
results
has
in death.
failed. That the mental health system has failed society. That's
So
what I say to that.
Well, listen, you're not wrong. There's a crisis. There's plenty of blame to go around, but
If that's the case, right? If we keep going, together as we keep talking about this, then let's go ahead and arrest the automatic weapon or the semi-automatic weapon, and let's go ahead and put it on trial. Let's put it on the stand and let it testify how it killed everybody in that classroom.
Well, we could just put the father on trial.
But wait a minute, the father wasn't there, and the father didn't pull the trigger.
No, but his behavior resulted in death of others.
But let's put the gun on trial. That's what we're talking about. Let's be honest. Because of the horrendous slaughter of these innocents, of this innocent, I am the first advocate to tell you, yes, horrible. I'm in. Okay. But I'm also the other advocate that says, what the heck is going on in this country that we have kids thinking that they have to go down there, the FBI getting involved after hearing that leakage on the internet and going, hey, your son is saying these things on the internet. Okay. And that father or that person should be saying, okay, where do I take him? What do I do? And you know what the system says right now? It's up to you. You figure it out. Call Dr. Brucato in Manhattan, give him a call, make an appointment. Well, he's booked for 16 years because he's so good. Okay.
So your solution is for Christmas morning, you get the kid an AR-15?
No, I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing. Okay. It's like the Red Ryder BB gun. You'll shoot your eye out. Okay.
Christmas
The Christmas story. You brought Christmas up, so I figured I'd tie it into it.
I got it.
Holidays are on the way, baby.
Okay. But who's the kid is the bad guy. He's the bad guy. Okay. So let's get rid of the tool. Let's arrest the tool.
Well, but really quick, before we go any further, so I've just been informed that the mother was arrested for elder abuse, not for what's going on with
elder abuse.
Yeah.
Who's the
I
elder?
rest my case.
I don't know. Her mother. She wasn't arrested for anything that had to do with the shooting.
Well,
Doxy Mom, you won't get deleted if you disagree with me. If somebody in the chat can give me one case one murder in the United States, and by the way, there's 23,000 a year on approximately.
Right.
Give me one where the gun was arrested. I'll wait.
Well, Chris, I think that it's an argument that depends upon one's definition of the age at which a person's brain is fully developed enough that they are making choices of their own volition. And in our culture, we generally place that somewhere around, 18 years old on average. And this person was well before that age at which the brain is prepared to make decisions like that. And the trouble is, you give a permission structure to a kid when you say, "Here, Merry Christmas, son." Right? I know that there was a warning that you were going to go to school and blow people away and fantasize about it, but here you go, son. I think that's what makes this case unique. And all I want to say is, Chris, you make really good points, and no one has the right to tell you that you're wrong or right. That's, people are entitled. Half the country agrees with you, probably literally, right? So let's be clear. Like this, we all just have theories here. I just think that the law is probably going to support this way of interpreting it, and I think it's a new precedent that you're going to see a lot of. I think that now that the door has been opened to this way of seeing things, like always, the law is a living, breathing thing, and people find ways to tweak it over time and how it's interpreted. And I just think what you're talking about is if you're going to go down this path, that you think it's going to have very dangerous results, because people will then take that interpretation with everything, even non-gun crimes.
41%,
goes down. Right.
41% of homicides in the UK, knives.
Okay.
41%.
Right. If I were an English parent, I wouldn't say, "Merry Christmas, kid. Here's your machete."
Correct.
Thank you. How many of those knives are in prison?
Well, I don't get I think a tool is a tool in the hand of a person.
Well, that's the point.
I know that
is the point. That is the point.
This is how this conversation exactly went last time.
No, because Chris is talking about this as part of a gun debate, and I don't think it's a gun debate. It's a question about the culpability of parents.
Correct.
To create a situation where a child can go out and do something where the kid has like a not fully formed brain, is a creature of impulse, already has anger, there's been warnings that the kid might do this terrible thing, and then on Christmas morning of all days, the Christmas tree and the in the house and the whole thing, you say, "Here, son, here's your AR-15." I think an argument could be made, even if they gave the kid a knife, an argument could be made that that's a way of putting a permission structure, that we don't think that there was anything wrong with what you were accused of doing. We trust you, son. And that's bad judgment.
Well, and also
bad judgment is
bad judgment, Gary, is not against the law.
that's
where I think, Chris, if you were on the defense, you'd make that point. And
telling the truth is not a crime.
Well,
look at that's what I was going to say, Chris, because when we've had this conversation about this before, and you have said, "Yeah, I think what he did was idiotic." But is it a crime? That's what you're saying.
I'm saying about the parents, not about the kid. The kid, they need to throw him away and lock the key.
Right. I agree with what I know what you're saying. I'm just saying what you're saying is you don't agree with what the father did in that situation. You told me that you thought that it was incredibly dumb for him to do that. But you can't arrest somebody for that. That's what you're saying.
Right. You know how this is going to play out. They're going to put that FBI agent on the stand. And the first question the defense is going to say, "Did you talk to this family?" "Yes." "What did you talk about?" "Well, we told them that their son had made such and such and such." "Okay. And what else?" "And we shared with them. We thought this was dangerous, blah, blah, blah." "Okay. And what else?" And we counseled them about A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. "And what else?" Blah, blah, blah. "Okay. Did you arrest anybody?" "No, sir." "Why not?" "Before Christmas. Why didn't you arrest them?" Well, there was no crime. Thank you. I rest my no further questions.
But
Next witness, please.
Wouldn't they have safe acted? Let's say, for example, this happened in New York. This situation, they would have safe acted the kid. And then if the parents got the firearm or the father got the firearm for Christmas, he would be circumventing a law that is designed to prevent the person from getting a firearm.
But Gary, there is no law. That was the point, or else they would have hooked him up and said, boom. Okay, what they're doing now is they're creating a law. They're creating a circumstance that did not exist before the shooting. What if the kid had not gone down and shot the school up? What then? What? Guess what? We're in the exact same spot. Okay, and this is what's going to play out, and the defense is going to play this out, and the Supreme Court's going to look at this and say, you know what? Oh man. Well, let's see. What do we apply to this? We're a common law republic. What laws apply? Where are they?
Well, people are saying in the audience, it's not a lie to buy your child a firearm. No, but if there's been a warning that your child wants to shoot people up at school, it's dumb.
Well, that's why I said that this is a this is an individual.
Right.
Situation.
It's not you're right. There's not a law, but it's dumb. It's bad judgment.
And I said to you, Chris, that I don't always agree with the law. I think that there should be, but I mean, you can't just go back and make a law like, out of thin air. But I mean, there's a lot of laws that are out there that I don't agree with, that people I don't think that attempted murder is a real thing. I think that if you point a gun at somebody and you shoot them and put a hole in them, your intent was to kill them, whether they die or not, is sort of just kind of up in the air, but your intent is the same.
Who's going to suffer? It will be the marginalized communities in the inner cities. You know why? Because they'll start applying it to fentanyl sales. Your son's selling fentanyl and he's 13. And we just had 15 people killed tonight. You're under arrest. For what? What did I do? I'm not selling the fentanyl. Yeah, but you know what? We've told you 4 or 5 times to have your son stop selling. And in fact, we've done controlled buys. You see where this can go? It can just keep going. It will keep going. It will keep going. It will keep going. And I hate the fact that AR-15s that kids are taking AR-15s into school and shooting people up. I hate it more than anything. A guy just about killed my son recently at a college.
Okay? Of course you do.
I'm with you. Okay. But go ahead.
Well, it's complicated because the parallel is not exact. For the parallel to be exact, they would have to go to the parents and say, we know your son is selling fentanyl and it could kill somebody. And the parents say, okay, officer, we'll do something about it. Then on Christmas morning, a box and it's filled with fentanyl, and they say, Merry Christmas, son. And then the son goes to school and sells it and kills somebody.
It happens every day in the inner cities, just like that.
But it's stupid. That doesn't make it not stupid.
We agree.
Right. But the question is not really about guns from your perspective. The question is something more like, is being stupid illegal?
Well, look at the comment on the screen, just like jailing parents for their kids' truancy.
Yeah. And Kamala Harris did that in California.
Yeah, that my sister had to go to court for her youngest son.
Yeah. And the girl had sickle cell anemia. She was in the hospital and the lady was arrested. And you saw how that worked out. And today it's coming back, but I don't want to go there. But the point being, we just can't start in this country changing laws to fit circumstances. It's like giving a prescription before a diagnosis. Okay. If you don't diagnose what the problem is, you can't give a prescription. But if you're just giving prescriptions because you think i.e., other people think, you know what, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. The victims, are young. It's horrible. Well, you know what? If you walked into a heart surgeon tomorrow and say, you know what, I got a pain in my foot, and he says, well, here, come here. And he hits you on the top of the forehead and he says, here, take this and go ahead and have a good time. Whatever it is. I'm telling you, we're on very thin ice.
All right.
And
I'm going to be a good boy, Chris, but let's just say that if there was anybody in this world who is currently twisting law to make it say what you want it to say, it's the Supreme Court. And the fact of the matter is the current Supreme Court in its current iteration that changes the law to say what they want it to say for political reasons. That's a huge problem. The law is no, I'm not giving an example. The examples are known by the audience. And the fact of the matter is, I refuse. You can look everything up from the Insurrection Act to, So I'm not getting into it. But the point is that the Supreme Court, maybe they learned it from them. How you can toy with the law to say what you want to say. Now, that having been said, let us move on.
You know what I love about the three of us? We and hopefully people in the chat can appreciate the fact that
we love each other.
And that we may not agree.
No.
But that's okay.
No.
We high five each other, but that's okay, right?
We like to do this.
Absolutely.
That's how we develop intimacy.
I have had this conversation with my sister, who I don't even want to go there, but I love her to death. But at the same time, she is just unbelievable on this thing. And I said, look, there are hundreds of, the whole reason in World War II, when Yamamoto wanted to attack after Pearl Harbor, the general or the emperor of Japan was saying, let's go, let's hit the mainland. And Yamamoto, who studied, here in the United States, said, no, you don't understand. And he goes, why not? And by the way, they landed in Alaska. Americans forget that they landed in Alaska, the Japanese army, on American soil. Okay. And long story short, when Yamamoto was asked to meet with the emperor about why they should not land in the United States, the emperor asked him one question: why should we not do this? And Yamamoto responded, the Second Amendment. And
I've heard
the story.
Yeah.
And the emperor said, what is this Second Amendment? Okay. He says, we will fight window to window, door to door. We don't have the resources. Okay. When the government steps in to the houses of American citizens, whether we like them or not, and say, how many guns do you have in there? Okay. Because we think, that A, B, C, and D should occur. Okay. We as a country have to think about Yamamoto, where he was a great leader for Japan. And it's interesting that he got the message clearly. He understood it. There are more sheriff's agencies in the United States than there are police departments. Do we honestly think that if parents start getting arrested for crimes their children are committing, and they're going to go in and start taking guns as a result of that we won't see things in this country that we've never seen in our lifetime? Let's be realistic about this. This is not just a conversation about, anything other than that guy on a Tuesday night with a 6-pack of beer on his on his truck seat and he's going bowling, and the sheriff pulls him over and says, "You have guns?" Do you think that's going to end well for Americans? No. I would submit to you, absolutely no. The solution is the jails have become mental health facilities. The solution is when somebody is having a mental health crisis, law enforcement and the medical profession need the tools to get these people help.
Right.
And that's when you,
in this situation, the tools were the parents. They didn't do it.
the tools were taking the kid to a mental health facility and impounding him for 72 hours so you and others could talk to him.
And only the parents could do that. The parents would.
And at that point, I can see the reality of law enforcement because we used to do it. Do you have any weapons in the house?
Right. Yeah.
Yes, we do. Okay. We're going to go ahead and confiscate these for now. Okay. Until we get a stability answer about your son. Okay. For your safety, for the public safety, for general safety. Here's a receipt. Okay. You come down and get them after we get a 72-hour release. Okay. Boom. It goes in. Okay. But you don't get to a place where you can just come in and say, "Hey, your son just committed this crime down the street. When did you get this gun?" "I gave it to him at Christmas time." What are you, crazy? We told you not to get it. We told you that he was dangerous.
You don't think that's unreasonable? You don't think that that's unreasonable to give your kid a firearm at Christmas when you've been warned like that?
Well, the question is always going to be, and again, the defense is going to put that guy up there and say, "Well, you warned him, right?" "Yeah." "Well, why didn't you arrest him?"
I get your point. I think
I do too.
Circle that's going to go on in the courtroom.
And guess what? The Supreme Court's going to step in, the one that makes crazy laws, like you just said.
They don't make it. They reinterpret them.
We are moving on.
They reinterpret them to protect who they want to protect. Moving along. Let's go into the next
question. Can Gary speak on the man-child phenomenon and why so many are committing heinous crimes?
I'm not sure. I can't answer because I'm not sure what they mean about the man-child phenomenon.
I don't know.
I mean, I would love to, but I'm not exactly sure what that means.
I'm not sure either. Somebody said, "Please corn dog me."
I don't want to know what that means.
I don't either. But I mean,
I don't want to know. I'll have a look in the Fictionary to find out what that means.
Josh, if you have time for my question about how I get my hands on the new Evil in Instructors Edition with a bit more details, is there such a thing, Chris or Gary?
Instructors Edition with more? No, I don't think you can have more details than I have in there.
I mean, it's bigger than Moby Dick.
I think it makes a better Christmas gift than an AR-15, but still an odd one. But I wouldn't make it a stocking stuffer. Let's put it that way. It's an odd book. Do we have anybody else on the phone?
No.
Is the line still open?
Thank goodness.
No. In all seriousness, I thought that was fascinating. Because I think that we were having a dialogue that matches the dialogue going on in many kitchen tables. That's why I think it's fun to kind of get into it, because out of, I wish that's how Congress worked, that people loved each other and they had healthy fights, because that's how you meet in the middle, right? That's very good. And but obviously we'll never see completely eye to eye on it, but that's all right.
Yeah, I disagree with both of you about most everything.
Good. I'm glad.
Just kidding. Except Buc-ee's. I co-sign Buc-ee's.
I like Buc-ee's. We agree on Buc-ee's.
We agree on Buc-ee's for sure. But no, I think, and people will go, "Oh, you choose sides on this." Don't. Yeah. It's not that serious. We're just debating, Yeah. And in the debate itself, and I enjoy conversations actually a lot. And
the one thing we can agree on is that your show always gets more interesting when it's all three of us.
Yeah. Absolutely, it does. There's no question about it. I think, though, let me see here if we got any starred
Right. When
questions.
Chris comes in, it's always fun because it's very sort of like professorial. And then Chris comes in like a bull in a china shop, and the next thing you know, it's like it goes from like, I don't know, like it goes from William F. Buckley to like Jerry Springer.
Well, we
It's
looked
dry toast, and the next thing you know, we're throwing chairs. Aliens that are married to
we look at it differently, though.
two-headed. It gets special.
Like Chris has spent his whole life in law enforcement.
I know. I love it.
You've been a doctor for quite some time, and you look at life through that lens. And I'm sitting here looking at both of you, just going, "You're both nuts."
But that's why I love when Chris comes, because you get out of your comfort zone, and then it gets kind of heated. It's like
I love the you and I have both seen, and Josh, you've seen, honestly, people who are just, if they're intent on hurting you, they're going to do it.
Yeah,
they're going to figure out how to do it, and it's such a passionate conversation in this country. I mean, there are semi-automatic weapons on the street, not automatic weapons. Their machine guns are not mowing people down. It's how fast they can pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, unless they've modified the weapon, is that possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Rare, very rare. But again, it comes back to where do you do? Or excuse me, what do you do? When do you do it? And who do you do it to?
Well,
okay.
Chris, if I ask it sounds like you think that there should be a ban for people who at least are on the radar as being psychiatrically disturbed. That they shouldn't be.
And the Secret Service did a whole study on that, as you guys know, just a couple of years ago, and the protocol that they put into motion actually caught cold. But they didn't follow through. And it's not the parents' fault. I mean, partially, yes, it's partially the parents' fault. No question about it.
All right, so we agree.
Well, sure. I'll partially agree that the parents have some culpability, but they did not pull the trigger.
Right.
Just like Jen Sodo may turn out to be, yes, I knew my daughter was getting molested, but I didn't kill her. Do we now arrest the Jen Sotos of the world do we do that?
No, I think it's very complicated. I think that the right person in that situation so far is in police custody. There's no question that Stefan Stearns is the black heart of that situation.
Right.
Now we're going to sort out all the other characters.
And Colt would be the black heart of the situation. When it comes to that, I understand what Chris is saying. I understand what you're saying too. That once again, it's an interesting subject because there's no definitive answer.
Well, my fear is if we keep going that route as a society, the worst communities are going to be the low-income community. They will be hit the hardest. Ultimately by law enforcement. I guarantee it. The kids in Chicago, the parents in Chicago, the single moms in Chicago, Detroit, New York, Boston, Miami, Dallas, all of these places where there are, communities that are struggling. At some point, if this becomes law, you can bet you they will apply that law effectively in these communities. And next thing you know it, you think we have problems now. It would be crazy.
Chris, let me ask you this, and this is another charged question, but if they can prove that she knew and turned a blind eye, is that a chargeable thing? Is that a chargeable offense?
If she knew what, though, that
her daughter was being abused,
they can charge her for that particular issue. They probably won't charge her for the murder.
No,
Because-
and I don't think that personally.
It's an endangerment situation.
Yeah, they could child endangerment.
But they
Yeah.
have to be able to prove that, right? I mean, they can't
Right.
just assume that she knew.
Right. And that's why some of the statements that she made about the phone, for an example, when they took her phone and they asked her, well, are we going to find anything on there? And she goes, no, not at all. Okay. Now, it's been long enough to where they've downloaded that phone. And if they had something, of somewhere, some information somewhere, she probably would be in a pair of bracelets right now.
Yeah. Well,
But she's not. So
no.
there's a reason for that.
And I know that because I've always thought that possibly they want her to testify, and then as soon as you say that, you get backlash. People saying, "Well, they don't need her testimony." Look, I think that they do. I think that you take any testimony that you can get to slam this guy home where he needs to be. A jury is going to want to hear that, I would think.
Yeah, if she knew after the fact and took action to preserve the information, i.e., keep it away from the cops, she could be charged with accessory after the fact. In California, they call that PC 32.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I used to give the analogy in interviews, talking to people where, I'd give and you guys have heard this, but I'll give it to you in 30 seconds. You're driving down the street, see your friend, he's hitchhiking, jumps in. He says, get me to the 7-Eleven. You drive him to the 7-Eleven, drop him off. He walks in, pulls a mask on, robs the store, shoots the clerk, jumps back into your car and says, get me out of here. And I used to ask people all the time, and I'll ask the chat, have you committed a crime? Let's see what the chat says.
And Kelly, I would just want to say, and I mean this with all due respect, in what world do they not want witnesses to take the stand? I don't care what you have. You also want witnesses. You want, they have photos and they have pictures and then what else you got? Well, we got witnesses. I mean, they want an airtight case. You can't just go with, because by the way, that happened a lot in the OJ case. And guess what?
Okay. So we've got a couple of folks that are saying accessory. Okay. So here's the law. Okay. Hey, yeah, Josh, yeah. Hey, we've got you on video over here, picking up your friend and driving him, dropping off at the 7-Eleven. Want to tell us what happened? Now, you got a choice. Yeah, I was driving down the street. I saw my buddy. He was hitchhiking. I pulled over. He jumped in. He says, get me to the 7-Eleven. I'm going to go buy something. You drive to the 7-Eleven. He says, I'll be right back. Gets out. Next thing you know it, I see him put a mask on. He comes running to my car, jumps in and says, get me out of here. And he's got a gun. Oh, what did you do? I drove him out of there. I'm glad you guys are here talking to me. Okay. Guess what? You're a witness. Now change that for 30 seconds. What are you talking about? I didn't pick anybody up. I didn't drive anybody around. I didn't take them to the 7-Eleven. I don't know what you're talking about. Now you're a PC 32, accessory after the fact, because you're concealing, hiding information that could be, yeah, grabbing a corn dog while he's there all the.
Yeah, they do have corn dogs.
But you see the nuance there and the subtleties of that particular problem. Okay. And that may be what's going on with Jen, and that's why they jammed her up. Like, look, no matter what you say, how you say it, when you say it, where you say it, if you said it and you know it, but you're not telling us about it, okay, this is your opportunity. Let's talk. Start chattering. I'm listening, i.e. the detectives. Okay. And they haven't hooked her up on anything yet. Now, is there still a possibility of the neglect and all this other stuff and stuff that they're not telling us about? There's always that possibility. But right now, they're not making that move. They're not making that move. The same thing goes for the parents. Speaking of parents, let's arrest them for Stefan's actions.
Yeah, I mean, you can't.
Why not?
Because they didn't know.
Wait a minute. You got comments from the parents saying, is this really the kid that we know? I mean, Stefan and yada, yada. They've been enabling that kid forever.
Yeah.
See where it can go?
Yeah, I get the slippery slope and argument. I absolutely do. But he's not a minor.
He's not a minor.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so but
he was a minor
at one point.
What if they know this kid was bringing things of inappropriate nature in a jar and showing all the girls? Wesley Allen Dodd's kid parents were contacted because he used to stand in the windows and flash himself all the kids coming home from school, and all of the cops came to the house so many times and told him, "Hey, your kid's still in the window. Would you get him out of the window, please?" And of course, we know what happened to him, and the list just goes on.
Unicorn 76. I don't know. So it says, so if they're using Jen as a witness, I don't know if they are or not. I have no idea. We don't know yet. And it remains to be seen if she's going to be charged with anything. But Dr. Gary's right. The black heart of the issue was Stefan. He's in jail. And it seems like now they're trying to sort out what was known, what wasn't known. And people are going to have a stance one way or the other. Like I said, I don't understand her. So it's hard for me to have a really strong opinion. I think that we're responsible for protecting our children no matter what. And that excuses of medication or disassociation or checking out. I find that those kind of arguments fall short, but that's not for me to decide. I mean, I do feel as though that young girl was abandoned by everybody, and in one way or the other, and taken advantage of in the most brutal, disgusting way possible. I have very little sympathy for the people around that situation, the parents, I have zero sympathy for Stefani. I mean, that guy is the worst of the worst. I don't have a lot of sympathy for Jen, but I also don't really understand her that well, so that's just my take on it. And it is just a tragic case. And are you doing more on that tomorrow, Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to do part 2 of that interview. And I stopped it at, she made a comment about something in the woods. And I want to do a little more research on that.
Yeah. Okay. Be on the lookout for that. Let me see. Let me make sure we have nothing going. I don't know. The call system crashed. I never put it back up. It just sucks.
It certainly was lively. I mean, do we have anybody else that wants to at least send us a?
It was fun.
Well, yeah, it's just hard to talk about this stuff because we're like a microcosm of exactly what people are bickering about. And
the now wants to know who timed her out. Well, I don't know. We'll get to the bottom of that.
Who. I don't know.
Let's see here.
I don't know what that means.
Can Ellie use JS testimony? What was that one, Josh? Against SS and charges against him? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They can use testimony.
Where's that at?
There's not a marriage privilege there.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. They aren't married. They were just kind of, I wouldn't say shacked up, but right. I mean, sort of.
Yeah, and he wasn't there for a couple of months and came back. So that there's not a privilege there.
Yeah. Let me see here. I think I should join the panel. Well, that's nice. Thank you. In 7 years' time, Maddie would have had physical signs of abuse. Like I said, I think that's why they're probably taking their time on them. Because this is, I don't know. I think that eventually she's probably going to be held culpable for some things. I just
What
don't.
are these Woody Allen comments that folks keep putting in the chat? What is this?
I have no idea.
I haven't heard them. But
I don't know. I don't even know anything about
second
Woody.
part of the video. Somebody fill me in.
I don't know. Woods is a common place to throw bodies. I don't know. What's Woody Allen?
I mean, I could dimly guess what they probably.
Like, is he married? He married a young girl or something?
Who knows? Well, let's wait to see what somebody says to clarify. But any other questions anybody has about more?
Somebody asked earlier. There is a good question here. Well, I started earlier.
Could somebody come up with something that is any more controversial than the questions we've been getting?
Yeah,
we're gonna get questions about like how we feel about like
abortion,
baby seals to make coats and
how nice the coat is.
I mean, it's like they're really, really, really like red meat kind of questions.
This is a cool question. Dr. Gary, who would you say is the scariest person besides Chris that you've met?
Can't answer it because of confidentiality surrounding people that I meet, because I meet most of them in clinical.
Well, what kind of all right, let's put it this way. All the famous people.
I think the best way to answer it is to speak generally.
Yeah.
To say the scariest type of person. The scariest type of person, in my experience, is a person who is a master of using humanity, humor, warmth, jokes, etc., to look like a person, to win your confidence, but has a psychopathic detachment from any compassion at all. I think those are the most evil people I've ever met. The person who can see a kid crying in the mall, who's become detached from his mother, look up to him and say, little boy, I can tell that you're upset. You come with me. I'm going to take you to the desk and we're going to call you mommy. Do you want me to get you a drink so you feel better? I'm your friend. Come sit with me. I'll make you. And then takes the kid off and assaults him, dismembers him, etc. That callous disregard masquerading as care. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was on a show called Violent Minds, Killers on Tape. It was like an Oxygen Peacock endeavor. Dr. Ramsland, Catherine Ramsland, was another psychologist on that show. And one of the people whose tapes we listened to was a guy called Gary Bishop, who was a child predator, a horrendous child predator. And there was a story told. It was one of the things we heard on the tape that made in conversation with Dr. Al Carlisle, was he told the story about that he was living at one point in this town that had like a little square or whatever. And, the neighbors, how it is, the people living there. And this woman that lived in the neighborhood had a very small child that he had his eye on. And he took the kid inside, and I won't get into the details of what he did to the child in a bathtub, but after doing it, felt that he needed to kill the child because the child might talk. And after he did, he went out into the courtyard, and the mother was hysterical that she couldn't find her son. And showing a kind of artificial compassion, he showed her great sympathy and said he was going to personally help her find her son. Just give me a second. I got to go inside and get something. He goes inside, and he comes out with a big box, says, I got to take this box somewhere. As soon as I'm back, I'm going to help you. Except that what the mother doesn't know is that in the box is her dead kid. Now that's evil. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the scariest kind of person. That person that knows exactly how to win you over, pretend, whatever, and has every intention from the minute they meet you to take advantage of you, destroy you, torture you, whatever, because it requires masquerading as human, really human, and reading in a person their vulnerabilities, knowing like you're sensitive to that, so I'm going to pick on that. I'm going to play on that. I mean, Chris, you've encountered people like that. They get under your skin because you know they're dark, you know, and I know, Chris, you and I have talked about another really terrible thing is the person that can lie without any guilt at all. Just make stuff up on the fly, right? That kind of person. That's pretty bad too. It's sickening. And just, and not understand that, the only thing we have is like the capacity to just take for granted that other people are telling us the truth. You know, so people for whom truth has no value whatsoever, that kind of thing, that's pretty dark stuff. But I think the worst of the worst are these people that it isn't enough to just kill as an expression of control or power. It's the taking of an innocent person and then in this protracted way torturing the person psychologically, sexually, physically for a long time. The kind of thing that Rex Harmon is accused of doing, where like you have a torture chamber in the house, that kind of thing, just in a protracted way. And then on top of it, sadistically mocking the families of the victims, like Harmon's accused of doing. Remember the calls that he supposedly makes where he's mocking the... So I think those are the worst. On the scale Michael and I did, those repeat torture murderers are the top, like the worst of the worst. And I think from having met different people, yeah, I think there are very few people that I meet where I don't believe there's any redemption in them. You know, I can understand how there could be humanity in most people, but there are some people that you meet them and it's like meeting with a lizard. Have you ever been in the room with a person that you really think gave off the vibe of evil, where it wasn't even it didn't feel like mental health. It didn't feel like, you know, it felt like their personality was so dark that you were in the presence of a person that was fully embracing darkness.
So I had, we'll get to this question here after this because it is a fantastic question, but long time ago, there was this kid that I went to school with. His name was Vinny, and I was friends with his family, all of them. And I always found Vinny just a little bit odd, just kind of a look in his eyes. He'd stare right through you. And, I didn't know, you know, he would just talk to you and just really weirdly. And, I'd always kind of ask like, what's up, you know, what's up with Vinny and, or whatever. So anyway, what happened, one day I invited his cousin over and his uncle over, and we were playing cards, and under my table, I had I guess it was like a hunting knife, you know, like a big serrated, you know, knife. It was just, I don't know. It was just there. And, Vinny was there and he picks the knife up and he's kind of twirling it around and he's looking at me kind of weird, you know, and he's like, "Hey, Josh, you know, do you like my knife?" And I said, "What?" And he's kind of sort of, not, I wouldn't say threatening me, but he's making me uncomfortable with the way he's talking to me with my knife in his hand. And finally his uncle just freaks out on him, says, "What are you doing?" Takes it from him. He says, "Get downstairs. You're out of here. You know, I'm leaving." And I remember just going, what, you know, that was kind of intense. Like it felt really strange. Fast forward about 3 years, Vinny's arrested for double homicide of killing his father and his stepbrother and then living in the house for a week with them.
Dead?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right.
He kills both of them. And I remember when I read that, I went like, that guy would have stabbed me I don't think that there was ever a doubt, you know? And it was just really, really strange. And I remember telling his cousin, I go, "Do you remember that whole situation? Like with the knife and stuff?" And he goes, yeah, I do. And it was just, I always felt like he was evil. I don't know why. I never felt comfortable around him ever one time. And I didn't pick up any mental illness or anything like that, but it was just an absolute nightmare.
So you were in the presence of someone that gave you that vibe.
Bad.
Right, but you see, this is what I'm talking about is a situation where a person goes beyond even being a psychopath into being a sadist. I think the worst people are the ones who get enjoyment out of the inhumane. Like if you're crying and whimpering, they laugh. And there are offenders like that, and they have no shame to tell you. Chris mentioned Wesley Allen Dodd. If you were to say to Dodd, and I'm Chris, you have recordings of the guy. If you were to say to Dodd, if you got out of here right now, out of jail, what would you do? He would say, with no hesitation, I'd go out and find another kid. And if you were to say to him, what are your fantasies of what you'd like to do to a kid? Dodd would say something like, I like to pick up two brothers and castrate one in front of the other. And when one is crying over his brother being castrated, I'm going to laugh at him. Then I'll kill him too. That kind of thing.
Right.
That's what you're dealing with. And, you know, when you spill over into that, when you, my God, I've seen better heads on boils, as they say. But Mike, look at his brow. It's so dark.
Yeah, that's the guy that was sitting in my living room with my knife, twirling around, going, "Do you like my knife?" And then a couple of years later, he goes to prison for. I mean,
but what is up with his brows? They're scary looking. It looks like a.
I don't know. He's scary, dude. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
He's got this brow that kind of. It's got that kind of caveman thing going on.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. You know, kind of. It's really scary. Well, but I get what you're saying. There is something about this part of the face that could really take away from the humanity of a person. Chris, you ever see someone with eyes like that? And you go, okay, something's up with that. You know, that stare. You know,
I just saw it.
That work? At work or in our conversation?
I used it. No, I'm telling you, when we'd like go to Starbucks and they'd bring him along, and I go, "Why did you bring him out every day?" They go, "Well, you know, his dad." I said, "But my dad doesn't matter. Stop bringing him places." And they're like, "Hey, do you want to go play racquetball?" I go, "Not if Vinny's going." I mean, it was a constant thing.
Outside of the murders that I've interviewed, I stopped a guy one night in an alley.
Yeah.
His street name was Scrappy, and he was an East Coast Crip, and from LA,
Scrappy,
out of South Central. And his street name was Scrappy, and I'm patting him down, and I get him all code 4, copacetic, no guns, no bazookas, atomic weapons, nothing on him. And I turn him around, but I have Irk at the time in the car. Irk's going nuts. Anyway, I write him down, find out, what are you doing in the alley, that kind of thing, slinging dope. So 2 nights later, I get a phone call, LAPD. Hey, we got a FI in the system on this Scrappy guy. Yeah, what about him? What was he wearing? He had on A, B, C, and D. Okay. Why? What do you got? Well, he just executed 5 people who were on their knees at a tire shop. I said, no kidding. He was I could feel that vibe from him. He said, Did he have a gun when you patted him? I said, no, we didn't find any weapons on him, or we would have hooked him up. It was okay. But that was evil personified. But the interesting thing about that, it was so subtle, that he would have it within him, a couple days later. And the way the story went down is he had all 5 of them kneeling down in front of him, and he went one by one and shot them all in the head.
Jeez, goodness.
With no regard at all.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of no
10-8, all units clear.
Just another day.
Another day. Yeah, on the street. And so those are the. Outside of the other guys, I mean, of course, that dude was dangerous.
He didn't even deserve that cool nickname, to be honest with you.
No, I mean, Mhm.
All right, so here's a question, and I can save it to later. The question is, in the Idaho 4 case, one of the roommates was unable to call 911 for an unusually long period. Could extreme fear trigger an immediate dissociative state?
The caller is asking a question that has bothered me for a long time about the lapse in time between what would have been glimpsing that there was death in the house and calling law enforcement. I am going to tread carefully and simply say I have no idea what that's about, but I think when the story comes out, it's going to be interesting no matter what, because it's very difficult to understand. Chris, haven't you also found that to be significant? The lapse in time?
Yeah, and we don't know what time they woke up.
Yeah. Right. It's one of those little like Columbo things where you just go, it bothers me. Like you just kind of find yourself
Well,
bugged.
haven't you heard about like people hiding in closets for like hours and hours at a time?
Well, listen, a professor of mine was killed that way by a guy who hid like that and then came out and killed him with a hammer.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about the victims hiding.
Oh, I thought you meant the offender hiding.
No. So say somebody breaks into somebody's house and they run upstairs and they hide in their closet. Say they have a cell phone on them or whatever. I mean, you could be completely frozen in fear. Who knows what's going through that person's head?
But I've heard, because what happens is that these things become like a Rorschach thing where people just project whatever interpretation they want to make. And if you want to project a nefarious thing into it, you'll say, oh, there must have been something they were hiding that they didn't want the police to come in there and find. So that's why there's a lapse. And if you are viewing it through the lens of victimization, you'd say, well, maybe they were so traumatized, that she got paralyzed, or she just found the people she lives with dead, that kind of thing. Or maybe she was sleeping, or people are going to project different things. And that's a good example of where like it's best not to speculate, because it could turn out to be something that isn't even in that list. But it is puzzling. That is one of those things, like I cannot wait to get to the bottom of. It's sort of like when I think about.
She did fall asleep, right?
Right, huh?
She did fall asleep as well.
It's just one of those things. Like, well, it's an odd thing to fall asleep right after discovering. Is that what you're suggesting? That they see someone dead and then go back to sleep? That would be odd.
No, I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Right, but it's just one of those things. Like, it's like I always think about when I'm on the other side. Like, what's the first life mystery I'm gonna want to understand? Like, hey, Lord, can you explain this to me now that I'm here? There are a couple of things I'd like to know. That reminds me of the old, a very prominent preacher told the story that he was teaching a class and he was getting heckled. And he said, he was talking about the story of Jonah. And the heckler, who was kind of an atheist, said to him, listen, how do you know? Wait, he said, how did Jonah get into the belly of the whale? And the preacher said, well, when I get to heaven, I'll ask God, and I'll ask Jonah. And the person said, well, what if Jonah isn't there? What if he's in the other place? And the preacher said, well, then you're going to have to ask him. I always thought it was hilarious. Well, anyway, but the point there. But Chris, what's the first thing you want to ask when you get there? What's the first thing you want to say? Please don't say man buns.
Is there a Buc-ee's nearby?
What do you want to know when you get over there? What's the first question you've got?
I don't think I want to know anything. I want to just hug my family.
Oh, that goes without saying. That's a beautiful point. But I mean, of all the great mysteries in life, is there anything you'd love to know the answer to? Like, why do people have to suffer in the world where there's a loving God? Like, why are there terrible things like children who get like mosquitoes' eggs laid in their eyes that eat their brain out? Like things like that. Why do those things happen? Why is there cancer? Why do people? I mean, aren't there things you want to know?
I think, for me, I think I would want to know, how did you get through it? watching man do what they did?
See, that's a great question. That's a brilliant answer. I love that. That's a good answer. I love that.
You know,
Don't you think that's a brilliant question, Josh?
I mean, it's
Good one.
absolutely it is.
Yeah, that's a good. What about you? What do you want to know?
There's a lot of things that I would want to know, but probably I just want to, I would want to know. No, I always wondered why why I was spared.
Ah, that's another brilliant question.
I just like it. It's something that I struggle with all the time. I don't know why. And, you know, why is it that I was spared and so many others weren't, in so many similar situations? And,
Mhm.
you know,
You see
you
how-
always wonder why God, you would, you know, that's where, you know, my faith and spirituality collide, because I just, I don't understand why a 5-year-old gets a brain tumor and dies.
Right.
Yet jerks, massive a-holes that are just the worst kind of people live a long, illustrious life.
Yeah, it's rough. It's
It,
rough.
it bothers me. You know,
But you see how each of us took our answer, our question, and has basically turned it into our life's work. The question of why there's evil in the world is the center of my entire life. See? And the center of why was I spared may be the center of yours. That's a very important question. What would be the first thing you'd ask? Because I think it gets right to the essence of a person's mission in life. And that's why I ask it. I think it's a really important thing to ask a person. Another really important question to ask a person is, what myth or fairy tale are you mimicking and living out with your life? Which of all the famous stories is the most like yours?
I always related to Peter Pan.
Ah, there's a conversation that could last 5 hours. I'm gonna resist interpreting, but you see,
Yeah, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
stays a child forever.
I feel that's it. Once again, I'm telling you, when I read the transcripts of when I was just a little boy, of, you know, the therapist talking to me, I was going, this isn't me. This is not me. This is another person, this is a child that's encapsulated. And because I did feel kind of like I grew up overnight. It was really strange, but I never wanted that to happen. I used to tell my kids, do not grow up too fast. Please, whatever you do, don't do it. Because why wouldn't you want to be a kid if you could, for as long as you can? And kids are so anxious to grow up. And it's like, it sucks. It sucks to grow up, man. And especially when everything kind of just whizzes right by you.
But isn't that the symbolism of the story of the Garden of Eden? That the tree of knowledge is there, and the father figure says, don't eat of it, right? And you do because you want to grow up. You feel like you're being made to be a stupid kid and you want to know everything. But then when you do, you realize that there was something to this idea of being a kid forever in this idyllic kind of place. In other words, the knowledge comes at a terrible cost. And you know, so that's what happens to some kids is, you know, they grow up too fast. And I don't blame you for wanting to be a kid forever.
Well, that was just a dream of mine. It just never happened because I felt
robbed because you got robbed of being a kid.
Yeah, it's just how it was, you know. It was like we're just trying to survive, me and my sister, man. Like I held onto her coattail and I said, take care of me, please. Cause I don't know anybody anymore. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know where we live anymore. You know, I knew that they were my grandparents, but I didn't know them
Right.
that well. I mean, we visited them, I don't know, every month, maybe, I don't know. And I just remember one of the craziest things I'll ever remember is just standing in the middle of the living room all alone, with my trash bag full of crap, and just going, I don't even know where I am. I have no idea. And it was just odd. It was just weird.
A lot of people can relate to you, and I think that this conversation, where I think Chris becomes like a kind of an archetypical figure in these conversations, is that Chris always, what I like about Chris, and there are many things, but one of the things I like about Chris is that he sort of has the quality of like the wise man figure, the kind of Obi-Wan, that kind of stands at the side and says, look, if you think of society wanting more and more freedom, it's sort of like a child that thinks it's ready for prime time, like it's ready to run the show. And look at all the fruit of it. We all got drunk on this freedom. We're like a bunch of kids. We're running the world kind of like the way an intern would run the company. Like maybe we should just give up and say the way they were running it before worked. That's what I think Chris sort of stands for that sometimes. And I appreciate that, because the truth is the world is suffering from a bunch of people that think they're ready, to be their own gods.
Mhm.
We're not good at it. We stink at it. We stink on ice. And you see what I'm saying? So I think Chris stands for that, and I appreciate that. And you and I, we're different archetypes, where I'm like the one that stands on the side and questions it, and and you're, you're, I guess, well, you tell me what archetype you are. You're, I guess, the one asking, why did this happen to me?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't. It's weird because I don't know if I ask why it happened to me. I just ask how I got out of it.
Yeah,
that's my question, because I know that things happen.
Because you're a good person. That what got you through it was ultimately that everything comes down to happiness is a choice. It's ultimately, you say, I'm going to get gobbled up in it, or I'm getting out of here.
My mother and my grandmother and my grandpa, but I would say my grandmother, they saved whatever was savable of my sister and I and that situation. And that's why I have the relationship with my grandmother that I do today. She's an 80-year-old lady. She drives me nuts. She's a sweetheart. She's everything, because after I got really attached to her really fast as a little kid, because she was inviting and she did want to take care of us. And sometimes she was overprotective by a lot, but it used to piss me off when I was a kid, and then I grew up and I go, well, I get exactly why she was that way, and things like that. So
to
protect me, and my whole life, it has been, that's why I have a great deal of respect for women, is because I know how strong a woman is, a mother, a grandmother. I've seen it, I've watched it, and I just go, I don't know how.
Good for you.
And so you
can't be a real man, in my opinion, without respecting women. I think the minute you have some issue with yourself and you can't do that, you haven't achieved it. It's like, somebody mentioned man children. That is the stuff of people who are profoundly insecure and need, they have some power trip. But it is only a very healthy guy says, I don't see any reason to put women down. They're the other half of this story. You see, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like the old joke that there would be no America if it wasn't for Christopher Columbus. Well, there wouldn't be any Christopher Columbus if it weren't for his mother.
Sure, right.
You need the other half. I mean, don't you think it's very important?
Yeah, and I think yes, I do, and I also think it's really funny too, because now that my grandma's 80 years old, and something will happen in the family, and they'll be like, "Oh, don't tell grandma," and I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, we don't want her to worry." I said, do you know who she is? Do you know what she's been through? I mean, I mean, come on, she's not she's a strong, and I've just got that. My sister's the same way. Just, they don't take no for an answer. If you get in the way of their children's safety, they'll they'll pull you over. And they hold everything together. I was raised by my sister and my grandmother, and my grandpa was around sometimes, but he was in the military, and so he would be away a lot. But yeah, it was like my sister and my grandma and my aunts, because I don't have any uncle. I have uncles on my dad's side, but that I was close with. They were all aunts, So I was just raised by women, and I've just found them to be much stronger, much more mature. I find men a lot of the times whiny little babies that bitch and complain about everything. Not all, but there's some really good, strong men out there. I just have always felt that a woman is like a man runs off on a family, and the woman holds the family together, the mother, the grandmother, the aunt, the this or that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess that's how I've always looked at it, and have a good deal of respect.
I always thought it was interesting that if you look at the storyline of the whole of the Bible, the story culminates ultimately with a woman being the one who steps on the head of evil.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting, because it is through a human woman that,
Yeah. I mean, like I said, if it wasn't for women, we wouldn't be here. But I'm just saying that personally, I truly do feel that my mother did save my life. And I feel like my grandmother took it the rest of the way, because
that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I'll tell you really quick, and then we'll get going here. But when my first son was born, and there were some people asking in the chat, that they wanted me to talk about, what led up to me being a father at such a young age. And I'll do that another time. But the day that my son Peyton we went to the hospital, and I was there with my at the time my wife, and my grandmother showed up, and she was there, and it was going into I don't know, several hours of labor, and I looked at her and I said, "You can go home," because it was getting late. And she goes, "No, I can't." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Because your mom can't be here. So I got to be here, because she would be here if she could." And I didn't say a word after that. As a matter of fact, I made her up a bed. I said, "She's not going anywhere. She's not leaving." And I'll never forget that. Never. It was so, she had made up her mind that she wasn't leaving until Peyton was born, and to make sure that I was okay and that mom was okay. And it was a
but that's why Jung used to say that there was nothing in the life of a person that was more damaging than a bad mother, because even a bad father has a very different effect than a bad mother. The mother is the one that we internalize to basically understand the idea that ultimately everything is going to be okay, that the world is going to love us, that their sensitivity, that people will, and somehow it's going to work out. And in those rare cases that it's the mother, not the male, because men are all other 8 times more likely to be violent than women, right? Testosterone is a doozy, which should be the title of a book. But I think that, but when a woman goes bad in those rare instances, they could do some very serious emotional damage. And my heart goes out to children that have abusive mothers in a very special way.
No.
But most of us have had our lives saved by a person who loved us into fruition.
And I think Stefan, I think his mom's going to reveal be a party in his play, in his background. If you listen to her interview,
Yeah.
she called them a couple of colorful words.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Someone's got to say it.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize. Finish your thing.
I wish you would more, but I think that's the thing.
I don't like when you interrupt me, Chris, but Gary's fine.
No.
You
Anytime.
should interrupt me more. But I definitely think that there is something about a good mother that could really save a person's life. And sometimes people need a surrogate parent. As a therapist, I often have to be a surrogate parent figure, which is very corrective to people who've had parents that simply didn't love them. Do you know how many times I have a parent come in the room and, you know, the child steps out and the parent says, "My kid thinks I hate them." And I say, "Well, where'd they get that idea from?" And they say, "Truth is, I didn't want them. I didn't want them." And I think maybe I don't abuse them. I do all the things parents are supposed to do, but I really didn't want them. The kid's right. I don't like them too much. It breaks your heart. There are parents like that. That, you know, they say things like that. They're not abusing, but they didn't want children. Or the kid, or they tell the kid they were an accident. Or they get mad one day and they say, you know, I remember years ago hearing somebody in the neighborhood I was living to say to their kid something like, when I was a little kid, I heard them say, "Every time I look at you, I wish I had fallen down the stairs when I was pregnant."
That's awful.
There's people like that in the world.
Horrible.
And think about what it does to a person's head.
Well, when I was born, they slapped my mother.
They just
Rodney Dangerfield joke in that.
And when they rolled me
rinse.
over, looked at my butt, they told her she had twins.
Oh no, I love Rodney Dangerfield jokes, and that when Chris turns into Rodney Dangerfield, that's when the party gets started. But he had the best. Chris, didn't he have the best lines?
Oh man, he was quick.
He was the best.
He was quick.
I love, my favorite one was when he said, "Oh yeah, I was the inspiration for twin beds." Just like he was so quick. He was the best. But anyway, but I think it's a powerful conversation because it's also a little bit, it gets back to that whole thing about buying the firearm for the kid. That a big part of this story is when you're given responsibility to be in charge of a child. I swear it's disgusting that you don't need a license to do that. Not everyone is created equal with regard to parenting ability.
That's a fact.
And there are some people, my God, I mean, they should not be anywhere near a kid. And they just pop them out. It's always those people that can have 100 children and the good people who can't. But it's like, there's something about these people, you know, it's like, it just breaks my heart. And I think to myself, my God, can't there be a test? That you need a test to drive. I mean, shouldn't you have to have a test before you could have a kid? You know, to just basic sensitivity, being there, knowing not to do stupid things like forget the kid's birthday or say hurtful things that are going to destroy them the rest of their life.
I watched a 3-hour program on a grizzly bear mother with her 2 cubs, like going to find the fish. And I was like, this grizzly bear mother takes care of her children better than a lot of parents that I've seen personally. And like you said earlier about people being animals, I'm like, I think that is what motherhood, the mom who was sacrificing her food and things like that for the child while she was trying to feed them, and they're depleting her body, you know, of vitamins because of the milk and stuff. She's got them on her back swimming against this current. I mean, it's and one in each hand, and it's just like an unbelievable thing to watch. And I, you know, 10 years ago, I'd have been like, I'm not watching this, but I was like, I started crying because I'm such a little baby watching this, like going, oh my God, this is the way that she was caring for them. And the narrator was like making it more dramatic. You know, he's like, if she doesn't find fish in the next, you know, they could all perish. I'm like, no, don't let them do that.
Right.
And then there's this wolf that was following him, and she would always have to chase the wolf. It was just intense, man. But it was too much.
But I guess what you're saying is that they're on an animal level. It suggests that probably in the norm, it's sort of biologically built in to love and protect children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think, for example, that's why women make such wonderful detectives and psychologists and so forth, because evolutionarily they're designed to pick up on tiny little subtle things, remarks, comments, noises, sounds, whatever, because that's what it takes to take care of a kid. The kid makes one little hiccup and you got to fly across the room. You need almost like a radar ability to be like, my son is 20 yards away and there's a noise, and you know, that's why I'm bothered by the Sebastian Rogers story. There was a thud. Well, then why didn't you go check? It's not consistent with what mothers do. And I think that what we're saying is that where there's pathology or moral collapse, that's when there's that not doing that, not caring in that way is very odd. And that happens to males too. There are things males are inclined to do that some of us don't do, and some do very well. But I think it's a fascinating conversation. But I think it has something to do with that evolutionary thing, that they have to be more in tune. Because when you know, tens of thousands of years ago, when the primary role was caretaking, that would have been very honed, that skill. Did you ever see it? You ever see a woman who could do that when she has a child? The way that she almost knows by instinct when something's wrong with the kid. Something's wrong. He's sick, and you're like, doesn't even have a temperature. He's sick. Tomorrow he'll have a cold, and he has a cold the next day.
I did that with my Ronell.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Good for you.
I remember looking at him just one day. I could see his face. I said, "You feel okay?" "Yeah, I feel fine." His face is, you know, flashing. He's just sitting there, and an hour goes by. I said, "You feeling okay?" He goes, "Eh." And I was thinking, I'll go, he's getting sick. I mean, he had the flu the next day. I could just see his demeanor. And it was even before he had all the symptoms. I could see it in his face. And it was that we were locked in. I could tell you that. Same thing.
Right. And to just get right back to the question about the worst people. The worst people are the ones who recognize those things, have those same instincts that they can tell you're sick, you need me right now, but they have absolutely no compassion. You have the empathy, but you have no compassion.
They're out of town.
They're out there, and those are the most dangerous predators in the whole world. They are the worst of the worst of the worst. Chris, you know. I don't have to.
Yeah, did you know, speaking of tune, that you can tune a piano, you can tune a guitar, but you can't tune a fish?
Oh God!
I think that. Look, I'm ready. I'm ready for bed. I know that you are.
That's funny, but I'm disturbed. I love dad jokes, though.
Oh man, that is it's a dad joke on testosterone.
It's not the worst one I've ever heard, but it's.
Is it a good one?
It's a good one.
Do you know why cows wear bells?
Oh no! Why?
Their horns don't work.
Oh no! Oh no!
I can't believe you gave me that much room, you two.
I'm not engaging in
three shows.
No.
I am
All right, last one. Why do birds fly south?
Why?
Too far to walk.
Yeah, I like that one. I had somebody say to me the other day, Shecky Green and the Catskills, tip your waitress. I remember recently somebody said to me,
cigarettes.
I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this.
Charlie Callis. No, it was somebody said to me, why did let me see if I remember. Why did the rooster cross the road?
Why?
Because it was stapled to the chicken. I don't know why that's funny, but it got me.
It's not.
Okay, but why did the
chicken? Not funny at all, but it's twisted.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
Right, to get to the other side.
Exactly. No, the light turned green.
Right. And I guess it figured I better get to the other side quickly because I've got a rooster stapled to me.
Correct.
Well, anyway, on that note, we have lost it. Okay, well,
Absolutely.
I think we're all a little delirious, I think.
was a great show. I had a lot of fun. Chris, thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
over.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you both. Love you
That was
both.
a lot of fun. I
course.
enjoyed
He adds something special to the mix. That's why when we saw you were done with the show,
We're
we
pumped.
Jump on.
Yeah.
And I love the call-ins. I think people like them.
Yeah, I just got to get this thing tuned in, and it crashed on me. So.
Yeah, the call-ins are great. We get really good callers, and again, we don't get any trolls. You don't even have a call screener, and we don't get anybody that calls just to heckle.
Oh no, we don't have a call screener, but I mean, I can see the numbers that are calling, and if they've called before and stuff.
What do you get calls from 1-900? I'm a troll. Like I don't understand. How do you know that from the number?
Well, I won't. First of all, I won't take a call from an unknown caller.
Oh, I see.
And then their name and phone number pop up so I could see, and if they've called before. I like to take those kind of calls too.
The call is coming from under the bridge.
Yeah, right.
Troll.
Hey,
Right. Okay.
Satan's on line 3. Well, I'm going to decline that one. So
I like the little song that you have when.
oh yeah. Here, let me give it. Since I never get to use it though because the callers are so good. But
oh, I like that.
let's see here. Here we go. You guys ready?
I love this. Yeah.
No, you don't like that call. I don't like that call. Not a very good call.
All righty. Thank you guys. It's my favorite.
Okay, aloha.
All right, Chris. Have a good night. Thanks for being here.
Okay, bye, guys.
Dr. Gary, had a blast. Thank you.
As always.
We will talk soon. One 900 trolls. I'm gonna put that on the block list. Oh, man, have a good night. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much for everything. Always appreciate it. Dr. Gary is good stuff. And Chris Mcdonough, as always, appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys. Check out the Witness Box. Hopefully, new episodes coming this week. Be sure to check it out, subscribe, or whatever it is. Allegedly, good to see you guys.